Today, at the edge of our hope, at the end of our time, we have chosen to believe in each other. Today we face the monsters that are at our door.
Hi guys, it's Gorazard here, and in honor of the release of Pacific Rim, me and Adam are doing a video on our top 15 personal favorite kaiju films of all times.
I kind of was going through this list, and my original list, my very first one, was nothing but Godzilla movies. I was like, that's just way too easy. It is, because the Godzilla movies have so many good kaiju in it, and just so many creative sort of, they're creative monsters, they're really outlandish, and they're fun to look at. But it'd be really easy, and unfortunately, a lot of people only know, like, Ultraman and Godzilla in terms of kaiju and stuff like that, and there's a whole shit ton more of those monsters out there, so I tried to fill my list with as much of those other movies as possible. Of course, there are a few Godzilla movies that do make it in on my list, but, yeah.
I was going to tell you that our list didn't really need to be limited to Japanese kaiju films. It could range from Western to even a British AI Gorgo.
I did have Gorgo on this list for a while, but I don't know, for some reason I've always looked at kaiju as Japanese. I just always have. And, like, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, for example, I never looked at it as, like, a kaiju movie. I always looked at it like, it's a science fiction movie.
No, I agree with you, because, technically, kaiju films are giant monster films that come from Japan. That's the term. The term kaiju is Japanese, obviously. And it all started with Godzilla, obviously. But when you look at a Western, quote-unquote, kaiju film, or you can call it a Western giant monster film, like King Kong or Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, it's just labeled as a science fiction giant monster film. Yeah. So I guess kaiju doesn't really apply to films like those, because they're from the West and they don't really originate from Japan.
Again, and like the only exception that I can really see to that is like Gorgo, because that was actually made the same style as the Japanese movies. I don't know, that still feels like it's science fiction to me.
Well, me personally, I kind of like see kaiju films openly. Like up to this point, I think that kaiju films don't necessarily refer to only Japanese monster films.
Well, definitely, especially with Pacific Rim and the new Godzilla film coming out. Right. It's definitely not just limited to Japan anymore.
Right. See, because of Pacific Rim, now it's more, how do we say, open. I guess that's the word to say, because Pacific Rim is technically a kaiju film, because it uses the word kaiju to refer to the monsters, and it's paying homage to the kaiju genre as well.
I do. I think when I watch this movie, I'm not gonna feel like it's just a science fiction movie. I'm gonna say, hey, this is a giant monster movie. This is a kaiju movie.
Right. I think every Godzilla and kaiju fan around the world is gonna go into Pacific Rim with that mindset, saying this is a kaiju film. Well, it's time to get into the list, and starting off with our 15, going down to 1. So, since you're my guest, why don't you go first with your 15?
All right, my number 15. You know, Zazibar, you and I have wanted to review this movie forever. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I felt a little guilty putting it on this list because I don't see this very much as a kaiju movie. I see it as mainly a science fiction film. But I decided to put the green slime on my number 15 list, mainly because the creatures themselves are people in suits. And they are really cool looking. I do. It's just, this movie is an extreme guilty pleasure for me. Like, I absolutely love this movie. It's probably going to wind up being on my top 10 favorite films of all time because it is just it's so enjoyably bad. You know, it is a fun kaiju movie. It's really stupid, but It's real fun to watch. Again, it's really, really heavy on science fiction, but because of the fact that there's all these creatures walking around on the Gamma 3, which is the space station that they're on, I would say that this is a very minor, but it still is a kaiju film. And because I love this movie so much, I just couldn't leave it off this list. And, you know, they're really cool designed monsters, and I think the actual idea of the film is really good. The fact is, like, you can't kill these creatures because if you shoot them, their blood only spawns more creatures. And that's cool because you're fighting something that's invincible, you know? And I think that's a really cool idea. I think it's a very original concept, believe it or not. Unfortunately, it just wasn't executed that well. And it's just a really enjoyable kaiju film.
I was going to see this movie today because I recently downloaded it from an illegal torrent. But I don't know why, 10 minutes into the movie, the audio got out of sync, and I downloaded the US version of it, which you recommended
the US version's actually a lot better than the Japanese cut. The US version is like 10 minutes longer, and it really is the better cut.
I think it's somewhat appropriate to add the green slime into the kaiju genre in a way, because kaiju, the term, literally means strange beast. It's been universally mistranslated as monster or giant monster.
Right. And again, the only reason why it's on this list, because I really do consider it largely sci-fi. The reason why it is on there is because, yes, they're men in suits, they're strange creatures, and they look really cool. And again, I just absolutely love this movie. I feel like if I left this off the list, I would be like shooting myself in the foot. Any chance I can get to promote that stupid movie.
But anyways, from what I researched from the Green Slime, apparently this was a joint production between MGM and Toei. Hence the special
that's what was interesting too. And the director Kinji Fukusaku, he's known for his action movies. He directed Battle Royale, which you should know.
Oh really?
Yeah, he directed Battle Royale. He directed one of my favorite films, where it's an interesting movie called Battles Without Honor or Humanity, which became famous because part of the soundtrack was used in the Kill Bill movies. But that's actually how I found out about the movie. But he also directed some of the Japanese portions of the war epic Tora Tora Tora. And that's actually what he's mainly known for here in the West. He's not a bad director, because he did great with Tora Tora Tora, and he did good with those action movies. It's just, I think this is one of his first movies. This is one of the movies where he was starting out on.
Yeah, one of his early films.
Right. And, you know, now that I watch it, it totally screams him, because I've finally seen enough of his movies where I can kind of pick his style. And, yeah, I could totally tell it was him.
All right, my number 15 is the original Young Gary from 1967. And, Adam, I noticed that I think Young Gary is also on your list.
He most certainly is on my list a little later.
Number 13. Do you want to get into it later, or you want to get into it now?
We can get into it later, because that way we can spend a little bit more time on it.
All right. Well, reason why Young Gary is on my number 15 is because it's my least favorite kaiju film. In my opinion, it's kind of like the least eventful. It was spawned in the midst of all the Godzilla ripoffs and imitations. Every time I watch Young Gary, I find it a little bit boring and a bit lackluster on many levels. And the thing that keeps me going about this film is that, you know, the kaiju is very, very Godzilla-esque, and I just love watching Godzilla ripoffs for some reason. I don't know why, but
oh, I totally know what you mean. Oh yeah.
And I don't know, the sequences with the kaiju in it, with Young Gary in it, they're very creative. They're very cheap, obviously, but that's the charm of the genre. And I love watching old-fashioned special effects in this way, even though that Young Gary's effects are a bit more cruder than the Toho and Daiei kaiju films. It's a decent kaiju film in my opinion. The thing that really agitates me about this movie, however, is the soundtrack. It is so agonizing because it just doesn't fit.
It's so bad.
It sounds more like they've taken the soundtrack from an outer space documentary.
Right.
And most of these tracks are placed into the destruction sequences, and they don't match what's happening on screen.
apparently the Korean cut is not in existence anymore.
Oh yeah. Apparently, Young Gary has a curse in Korea. The original Korean language version of Young Gary, which is supposedly 100 minutes long, yeah, it has been lost. The story behind it is that when American International Pictures bought the rights to Young Gary from whatever Korean company made it, they sent all the negatives to the United States, and as the legend goes, the shipment got lost, or they got destroyed along the way due to poor packaging. But yeah, the Korean studio, sent every single negative they had. They didn't even bother holding copies or just sending them copies of the original negatives. They sent them everything they had, and they got lost.
Who the fuck does that?
I have no idea. But apparently, they salvaged enough footage to produce the now well-known U.S. version of that film. So at least not all of it has been in vain. But yeah, and the same thing happened with the 1999 remake.
Yeah, I heard about that one.
They didn't ship it to to Sony, not all their negatives. What they basically did was that the studio had so much faith in the quote-unquote 2001 upgrade, they thought it was going to overshadow the original 1999 release. So what they ended up doing was, I'm assuming, was destroying the original 1999 cut in favor of the 2001 cut. That's just my theory. There has been no confirmation from either the studio or director or anyone involved with the production of the 1999 Young Gary what happened to the original 1999 cut.
Are the aliens in that one?
No, I believe they are, because as you can see in the trailer, the spaceship is in it. Although Wikipedia will tell you that the aliens are not in it. But yeah, I believe the aliens are in it, because how else is Young Gary going to come back from Bones?
Oh, that movie's so bad.
Right.
I'm sorry, I like the original one better than that.
I like them both equally the same. Although I kind of favor the remake a little bit, just because of its really, really, really bad production values, because it's so laughable. Like,
it is so bad.
It's so cute that they thought that they were gonna market this as a really big Hollywood-like film.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. And the acting is over the top. Is the definition of a good bad film.
Right. I know we're talking about the original Young Gary, but one thing I want to add about the remake is that the first time I saw it was on the Sci-Fi Channel, and I enjoyed it because I thought it was a sci-fi original movie. Then I later found out that it's not an original sci-fi movie, that it was an actual legit expensive film from Korea, and I said to myself, oh my god, this was so bad. And it's embarrassing to know that at the time, the Young Gary remake was considered the most expensive film Korea ever produced.
Now that's sad.
That's embarrassing, because it goes to show how much money Korean films have to make effects-driven films like that.
Yeah, but you see, here's the thing with the remake that just kind of bugged me. Why did they go with CG? It would have been a heck of a lot cheaper, and it would have looked better if they just used a fucking man in a suit.
Apparently, Shin Rae-hung, I think that's the director's name, he was inspired by not only the Heisei Godzilla and Gamera films, but he was also inspired by the 1998 American Godzilla film to produce Young Gary. And he thought that the film would have been more marketable if it had a CG kaiju instead of a traditional rubber-suited kaiju in it. And that was the whole point of the casting of Western or Canadian actors, is to make the film appealing to international markets, which obviously didn't work.
Number 14. I know I didn't say I put many Godzilla films on here, but this one I couldn't resist. I had to put Destroy All Monsters on my number 14 list. I really get into this movie. Like, I can't stop listening to the soundtrack. Like, may I just say that that's some of the Kira Ifukube's greatest music comes from this movie. Especially that military march.
Right.
It's some of the greatest music in cinema history, period. And dude, this is like, I saw this when I was a kid on Sci-Fi Channel. Seeing all these monsters on screen It was like a dream come true. It really was a dream come true. This is like a kaiju fan's dream. And I know a lot of people say that Godzilla Final Wars really overshadows this movie in terms of how many, like, kaiju they put into the film. I still think Destroy All Monsters blows that version out of the water because the monsters in this movie are just so fun. Like, destruction of Tokyo is great. Also, we get some great scenes of Godzilla destroying New York. We have great scenes of Mothra ramming into a train, and we have Rodan flying over Moscow. It's just so fun. This movie is really fun, and another thing that I really want to point out is the cinematography in this movie is fantastic. I love the zooms that it has, and especially the original Japanese dialogue in the film. The acting's really good. It's really top-notch, and you can definitely tell that Toho put an awful lot of money into the movie. And, you know, just to show more on, like, how I like physical effects more, the wire working on that set with the final battle with Ghidra and all the monsters, so many wires were on that set. How none of them wound up tripping over each other is beyond me. That is one of the greatest monster fights ever. And it just astonishes me that they were able to do so much with the time that they had to make this movie. And they did it extremely well, and to me, it looks beautiful. This really is one of the greatest science fiction movies. Again, this movie's really heavy on the sci-fi, with, you know, like the alien invasions and stuff like that. Right. Which I also want to say, the aliens are interesting and to me a little bit more frightening in this version than in Godzilla Final Wars. Is they are women. And, you know, we're not used to seeing women aliens, and so that's cool. And it's new. That was another thing too. Was it's new. Just like seeing all these monsters together in like one battle royale. This movie was completely new, and it really is one of the greatest science fiction monster movies out there.
My first exposure to Destroy All Monsters was actually not on cable, but on VHS, and it was around the time where Zilla 98 was coming out, and they were putting out all of the Godzilla films on DVD and VHS, and I saw this copy of what looked like a Godzilla movie to me, because by this point, I only saw Godzilla vs. Gigan and Biollante, and I was getting close to my third Godzilla film, which came to be Destroy All Monsters. And the cover had all of these, it was an animation, basically, of all the kaijus you see in the final battle. And I thought it was a cartoon, and I never seen a Godzilla cartoon before, and I was eager to watch one day. And so I picked it up, and I saw it. I was blown away by it, too. I remember my earliest childhood memories watching this film is skipping the human scenes to get to the kaiju scenes, because, like you said, they're so well crafted, well structured, and it's amazing how, like, all the wire work and all the practical effects are well done altogether, especially the final battle scene. But what was impressive to me was the destruction of Tokyo caused by Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, and Manda.
Oh god, yeah, like they could have just picked one monster to destroy frickin' Tokyo, which may I just see when Kyoko Manabe is walking up there and she's just watching as Rodan is destroying the city. She gives this little smile. It's perfect. So you think that Rodan's going to destroy the city. You're like, yeah, that'll be a good scene, because we like watching Rodan destroy the cities and shit like that. No, they freaking got Godzilla in there. They got Manda wrapping around a bridge, some of the best wire work I've ever seen. And they got Mothra that comes randomly out of a train station. Right. Oh my god. Like, they have to go all out. Like, it's not just one monster, they gotta have four. And it goes again when they're attacking the Keylog base for the first time with the remote-controlled tanks, and Godzilla comes out, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere comes Anguirus, and then all of a sudden Rodan starts chasing the SY-3. It's a monster royale.
One thing I want to add about the Tokyo destruction sequence is that image where Manda wraps himself around the bridge and you see Godzilla in the distance on the other side.
Yeah.
It's one of the most iconic shots in the whole movie, if not the Godzilla franchise.
And the music by Akira Ifukube on that scene is perfect. It's unnerving. It's huge. It's heavy on the brass. You got the trumpets blaring at you. It just matches the entire scene. It is perfect.
And it technically is the last hurrah in a way, because originally Destroy All Monsters was supposed to be like the final Godzilla film. Supposedly.
It was supposed to be like their final, yeah. And that explains why this movie had such a big budget. This movie, it wasn't a B-grade movie at all. This movie actually had, it was a rather expensive movie, and it was a rather ambitious project.
Oh yeah, okay, well, that's your number 14 now. On to mine. And technically not a kaiju film, but like I said, I openly consider kaiju overall open to all monster films. Mine is the original King Kong, which you can say pioneered in a way the kaiju genre. King Kong, the original, is a timeless classic. It's truly the embodiment of 30s era films. It went on to inspire Mighty Joe Young, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and all these other giant monster films from the 50s. And of course, it also played a part in inspiring Tomoyuki Tanaka and creating Godzilla. King Kong is such an impressive film for a movie that was made in the 1930s, especially in the early during the Great Depression. I watched this movie as a kid. It's basically a nostalgic movie for me. I remember being impressed by all the effects done by Willis O'Brien. When I was a kid, I had no idea how those effects were done. My initial theory was that they used a man in a rubber suit, but then I later found out that they used a miniature puppet model that was controlled by Willis O'Brien frame by frame, and I thought that was very damn impressive, and especially since this film had a huge, expensive budget that RKO was gambling on and didn't have faith in. Cooper, he had somewhat faith in the effects, even though he hated Willis O'Brien's Lost World effects. They just created a true masterpiece. It's a film that just gets better with time, in my opinion. And I haven't seen it in a while, but I've seen it millions of times to remember it by heart.
I would never consider this movie a kaiju film.
Well, I added it into my list because I think it, pioneered it
Yeah,
in a
I
way.
see where you're going. It's just, you do realize that King Kong's my favorite movie, right?
Yeah. 33 or 06?
Well,
Both?
both. Yeah. Because 33 introduced me to visual effects. It introduced me to fantasy. 05 made me want to make movies. And so that's why they're both on the list. To me, it's the greatest movie ever made. Like, there's no debating it. It's got a great story behind it. It has a great story. It's full of some allegory. It's got some great visual effects that I still think are absolutely fun to watch today. And considering that that movie was made in 33, you kind of have to wonder how the hell they did it, but they did it. It has one of the greatest characters of all time, and it's not one of the humans, it's an actual monster. It's a puppet. And they were actually able to make it into not just a giant monster, they made it into a character.
Just like James Rolfe, I have no idea why this movie's not considered the greatest movie ever made instead of a Citizen Kane and all that.
I understand. Well, a lot of people put it on like the top 10 list. I think King Kong has actually inspired more people to become directors or to become writers or visual effects people than any other film out there. And I'm very proud to say that I'm on that list too.
Right.
King Kong just totally opened my eyes to the world of cinema. Completely opened up my eyes to the world of cinema.
I heard that at the time, during the Great Depression, it was considered one of the most profitable films during the Great Depression, and when it was re-released in 1952, it exceeded the box office records from 1933.
Yeah, by a long shot. It actually, I think, was the most profitable movie other than Gone with the Wind for the decade. I'm not sure, but it's it's a good film. Even when it comes down to the music score for the film, it was revolutionary. Like, nothing like this had ever been attempted before in cinema. Philippa Boyens said that making King Kong was people reaching for the impossible in terms of cinema. And I completely agree with that statement, because this movie, all intents and purposes, should have been impossible to make. But they still made it. And it looks fantastic.
I guess now it's time to move on to our, number 13?
Yeah.
And Adam, your move.
Yeah, my 13 was Yongari Monster from the Deep. Okay, I want to tell you where I was first introduced to this. I was waking up when I was like a 6-year-old kid, and my parents were laughing their asses off at something. And I come walking out, and they're like, Adam, we're taping this movie for you. It's called Yongari Monster from the Deep. And they watched it, and they kept laughing, and I was watching, I was like, yeah, I can understand why people are laughing at this. Because even when I was that young, I was like, this is really bad. But the visual effects are fun. Yeah, they're really bad, especially the pipe in Yongari's mouth. But, like, the scene where he comes bursting out of the mountain, I think is one of the coolest visual effects scenes in terms of kaiju. I don't know why. It's kind of generic in terms of some of the other ones. But it's fun to watch. Because he just comes bursting out of the mountains, and I love his roar. Yongari is an interesting-looking monster. I mean, sure, he does have a very similar... He looks very close to Godzilla, but I like how his skin is black. I think he looks cool because of that horn on his snout. I think that looks really cool. And, I don't know, all the scenes in the movie that stick out to me in terms of that film is definitely the tank scene, where the 3 tanks start firing at Yongari. I love that scene. And this is just a really fun and dumb kaiju movie that it's very nostalgic for me. Like, whenever I'm sick, I either watch this movie or Monster from a Prehistoric Planet. It's just so fun to watch. Not much to really say about this one, but because we already talked about quite a bit of it. Other than the fact that it's just fun, and I think in a kaiju film, or any kaiju film buff, if they haven't seen it, need to see it.
What keeps me going on this film is the kaiju itself and the effects, because, they're pretty well done.
They're fun. Yeah, and, they actually look better in widescreen. They look better in its original aspect ratio than they do pan and scanned. Because at least when you're watching it in widescreen, you kind of get this feeling like, yeah, somebody put their own blood and sweat into the making of this movie. Somebody put a lot of effort into making it look as good as they possibly could, considering the budget that they had. When you're watching it pan and scanned, it just looks really cheap. So I always have to watch this movie widescreen.
Right.
Because it's just enjoyable to watch. It's more enjoyable to watch in widescreen because you can just see... It looks more grand. It really does look more grand if you watch it. Like, I know you uploaded it in widescreen. Thank you for that, by the way.
I've always felt that the character Yongari, or however you pronounce his name, apparently...
I always pronounced it Yongari.
Yeah, apparently...
Because I'm so used to watching the old one with the dub, and they call him Yongari.
Yeah.
I just can't help but say Yongari. It's like Ghidorah. It's like I hardly ever say King Ghidorah. I always say Ghidorah.
Well, my introduction into the character was, of course, the remake, and in that version they call him Yongari. So I've always been used to that term, but
yeah, you know what? I was introduced through that movie with Reptilicus. On Sci-Fi, Reptilicus played, and then all of a sudden Reptilian played. And I was like, okay. And so when I actually found out, it wasn't until much later that I found out that it was actually supposed to be a remake of Yongari, which I didn't see Yongari until I was actually a little bit older than I was when I first watched Reptilian. And so it always sort of confused me, but of course, now that I'm a 17-year-old teenage fuck, I kind of understand what's going on. And so I was introduced to Yongari before I was introduced to Yongari, but technically I didn't know it because it was called Reptilian.
Yeah, the same thing with me. I was quite aware, way before I ever seen the remake, I was quite aware that an old 60s kaiju film called Yongari, Monster from the Deep, existed. And then all of a sudden there comes a Reptilian on the Sci-Fi Channel, and the monster is called Yongari. And I think to myself, can this be the same monster? And then I just disregarded as, no, it can't be. It doesn't even look the same.
Right. To be honest, I always thought it was a remake to Reptilicus, because it was called Reptilian. And I was like, okay. And they were playing back to back, and so that always confused the living fuck out of me.
I basically covered everything I needed to say about the original Yongari, even though I talked more about the remake than the original.
Well, we kind of balanced it out with this one.
Yeah. But, balance is restored. Okay, I guess it's my turn?
Yeah.
Yeah, my number 13.
Yeah.
I don't know if some kaiju fans will hate me for this, for not being at least on the top 5, but my number 13 is Gamera 3.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
And I know you have like the entire trilogy on your list, which I'm beginning to question why you didn't break it down into individual films instead. But
I know exactly why.
I'm going to talk about Gamera 3 later, so I think I should skip my number 13 and just go into my number 12, since we're basically going to cover the trilogy later on. My number 12, skipping into it, is Godzilla 2000.
I hate that movie.
What?
I love that movie.
Oh, I thought you said I hate that movie. I was about to say, why?
Oh, I used to. I actually watched it again recently, and I was like, actually, no, this is really good.
I seen Godzilla 2000, not in theaters, on its home video release, and it was the greatest Godzilla movie I've seen by far at the time. And up to this day, I consider it somewhat an homage to the Showa Godzilla films in a way.
Yeah, me too. That's what I've always said.
Okay, the later Showa films, we can all agree, somewhat got a little bit campy. There's quite a few that are serious, like Destroy All Monsters, Invasion of Astro Monster, even though it has a little bit of cheesy moments. Mothra vs. Godzilla especially. And I believe that Godzilla 2000, it just takes those the serious ones from the Showa era and just basically puts a spin on it in a modern context and just, delivers an homage while at the same time revitalizing the franchise in a different structure. And the design for Godzilla it's epic. Me and Bill agree on this. It's what we believe the design for the American Godzilla should have been. The design. It's completely drastic, radical in many aspects, but it's close to that classic design of Godzilla.
Yeah, you can see it's new, but yet you also see the Godzilla. It looks like Godzilla, but yet it's something completely new. And that's what should have happened in 98. Godzilla 2000, I watched so much when I was a kid on Spike, I got sick of it. And I didn't watch it again until I was like 13. And then I was like, yeah, I still don't really like it. Still kind of sick of it. And then I watched it again when I was 16. I was like, holy fuck, this is actually really fun and epic. And I just want to say right now, American cut blows the Japanese cut out of the water.
Yeah, I own both the Japanese cut and the U.S. cut. And the first, up to this point, I was so used to seeing Godzilla 2000 that I know it by heart from every angle. So by the time I saw the original Japanese version, it kind of felt like an unfinished piece of a movie. It kind of felt like the rough cut of Godzilla 2000.
Right? Yeah. And, well, even the director says he prefers the American cut.
Right. I think that was Toho who preferred the
yeah, that's what I'm sorry.
Because believe it or not, they produced their own English dub of the film, which was a common practice for Toho during the 60s. But that cut was never released because they saw the U.S. version, and they found that one superior than their English dub and, of course, their original Japanese dialogue version.
Well, yeah, and the thing, too, is the Japanese version is really fucking confusing. I mean, because not that a confusing kaiju movie isn't a bad thing, but it was confusing to the point where it didn't make sense. The American version, yes, dumbed it down, but made it intriguing enough that you still thought. And another thing, too, is I hate the Japanese score. I hate Godzilla's theme, the Japanese theme to Godzilla.
The soundtrack is one of the reasons why I love this movie.
Well, the English soundtrack is good, but the Japanese one sucks. Especially when Godzilla first arrives, when the tanks are going after him, was way too slow. And it wasn't epic enough. And then the American cut took out that music and added in, a really militaristic style of music, and to me made it epic.
What that scene showed me at the time when I saw the Japanese version for the first time is that pacing is everything when it comes to music. Because I remember watching the U.S. version and then the Godzilla versus the tank scenes. It seems so not fast, but really keeping the progress of the pacing. Like it seems so perfectly paced. But then I saw the Japanese version, and it's not edited down. The only thing that's different about it is the music.
Yeah, and also in the Japanese version, the scenes with the tanks moving out takes forever. And also, I hate Orga's roar on the original version. And also, I love how in the American version they put Godzilla's original Akira Ifukube theme back in there. Well, one of my favorite re-edits is when one of the characters goes, I wonder what Godzilla's thinking right now. And And in the Japanese cut, it just cuts to him walking through the city. In the English cut, it cuts to an immediate close-up on Godzilla's face, and then to a shot of him walking through the city. I don't know, there's just little tiny cuts like that just makes the American version really good. And above that, the Japanese version is horribly edited because they have, like, no sound effects.
It seems like there's something missing from the Japanese cut. And what the US version does is basically, like, bring those elements that were missing from the Japanese cut. Sometimes there were scenes where some of the sound effects were missing in a way, even though they put them there. And the sound effects that they added did not match what was going on screen. And what the US version did was, like, enhance those sound effects. They either replaced them or altered the sound of it.
The American cut's way superior.
Right. What I love about the soundtrack, and I know you just said right now you hated the soundtrack, but I love the theme for Godzilla in this film.
It's shit.
I don't know why you hate it, but I love it because it sounds so, how do we say, nostalgic in a way. I don't know, it just speaks out Godzilla, that theme. It sounds like it could be, in my opinion at least, the successor to Godzilla's original theme from Ifukube.
There's only one track from the original movie that I like, and that is the one where they're setting up the bombs. But my favorite track in the American cut is the one where the tanks are moving in. I don't know, I like military marches.
Basically, to summarize what I feel about this movie, it feels like a classic Godzilla film revitalized for a new generation. And this is how TriStar should have handled Godzilla in a way. And they almost handled it this way with John DeBont. I read the script, I did a review on it, and it feels like a timeless, classic Godzilla film that pays homage to the Showa era. But I don't know why Sony rejected that version. But this film, it does what John DeBont was trying to do with his Godzilla, and that was pay homage to the original Godzilla. I mean, you have a classic Godzilla destroying Tokyo, you have Godzilla battling another giant monster, and you just have that whole saving the world aspect that you see a lot in not only Godzilla films, but a majority of science fiction films. Adam, number 12, your move. Reptilicus. I hate to tell you this, but I don't like this movie as much.
I don't like it either, but it's fun because it's a fucking puppet.
Denmark's first kaiju, and it turns out to be shit.
Yeah. It's really... This movie freaked me out when I was a kid. A lot. This movie, like, I hid behind the couch. Scared me. One, Reptilicus' roar is really creepy. And two, it ate that guy. And it's really terrible now, like, I laugh at it. But when I was a kid, that scared the living shit out of me. Like I always said, I'm going to be eating mac and cheese or something like that, and Reptilicus is going to rip open my house, and then he's going to eat me.
That's one of the shots I remember from this movie, and it's what I hated about this movie too. I'm gonna put out a confession right now, and a lot of you are gonna think I'm a wuss for this, but I hate that kind of monster violence. I don't know why.
Yeah, you hate it when you hate kaiju eating people.
Yeah, I hate it when kaijus eat people, or they step on them, or when you see them dead to rights killing people. I don't know why. I don't know if it's some psychological thing, but I don't know. I just hate that kind of monster violence. I prefer it if it be left to the imagination, as if okay, let's say you have a shot of people running away from the monster, then the shot cuts to the monster trampling through the city, and you just assume in your mind that he's stepping on people. I'm fine with that kind of monster violence. I don't like it when you actually show it.
You would hate my Godzilla movies because I have Godzilla killing people left and right.
As long as he doesn't eat people, I'm fine with it.
Oh, no, he doesn't eat people. All right, yeah.
Okay, yeah, but for some reason, I don't mind if people get crushed by their tails or something, or get crushed by rubble. For some reason, I don't mind that. But the other things I do mind.
Sick motherfucker.
But I don't know.
But when it comes to a kaiju eating people, no. Oh my god.
I don't know. I just find that so unsettling. I don't know why. It's a psychological thing. I don't know if you knew this or not, but that shot where Reptilicus eats that guy, it's not in the Denmark version.
Well, what's funny is in the Denmark version, they cut out, or the Reptilicus flies, and in the American cut, or the Western cut, they cut it out, thinking that it was too unrealistic. But yet the rest of the goddamn movie's fine.
Right. I've always questioned that. The whole monster in general looks super fake.
But it looks so bad. It's really too bad because this movie had government aid, and it had a big budget. How the fuck did they fail at making Reptilicus look like shit?
Manda looks better.
Manda looks better. Manda looks a hell of a lot better than Reptilicus. But it's a fun movie, and I had to put it on this list because I have fun watching it.
I haven't seen it in a long time because I refuse to watch it again because it's the embodiment of why people make fun of fans like us, in my opinion, because it's so fake. And it has a decent premise. It has an intriguing storyline, but all of a sudden comes the monster, and all of a sudden all of that is in vain. The monster is not that convincing.
Yeah, they shot this movie in Denmarkian or whatever that language is called first, and then all of a sudden they filmed it again in English.
Apparently, in the English version, only the slime.
It's not there.
Yeah.
Well, the slime and the slime was added in the English cut.
Which up to this point, I have no idea why it was added, because when I first saw this film, the slime really didn't do that much damage, or it didn't have anything to do with a certain scene. It was just at random at most points.
Yeah. But I love Reptilicus' roar. Or at least in the English version. The Denmark one kind of sounds retarded, but... Well, goddammit, the Denmark one is retarded. It has a musical number in it.
It does?
Yes. You know that guy who sticks his hand in the... His name's Marcus, I think. But he sticks his hand in the electrical eel thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. After he gets fired, he's sitting with a bunch of children in a park and starts singing a song about Reptilicus.
Oh my god. I haven't seen the Denmark version, so... Now I'm tempted to go and download that movie.
I almost started crying. I was like, why? Why? A musical number, really? But I digress. It's a fun kaiju movie that wasn't made in Japan.
Number 11? My number 11 is Godzilla Final Wars. Originally, I was thinking of adding Destroy All Monsters into it, but then, I started rethinking my thoughts, and I just like Final Wars better. And
it's really badass, and it's every Godzilla fan's wet dream, but...
It's badass. It's freaking Ryuhei Kitamura, of course.
It's awesome.
I remember hyping over this movie so bad, overhyping it. I was 100% certain at the time that this movie was going to be released in the United States in theaters on a global scale. And boy, was I wrong, and was I disappointed. And when it came on DVD and I watched it, I loved it so much that I didn't care that there were Matrix-looking people or X-Men mutants. I just loved it that it was the massive battle kaiju royale that I was somewhat expecting. Because this was literally unlike any other Godzilla or kaiju film I've ever seen. It was like a mixture of several genres together. But then I later figured out that this is Ryuhei Kitamura's style. He blends several genres into one film. He blends
freaking everything together.
Right.
It makes epicness out of it. Which I still have to thank you for making me watch Versus and then making me watch Godzilla Final Wars again. Because after watching Versus and then watching Final Wars, I was like, never mind, this movie's really epic.
Yeah. You gotta...
Like, I found myself, and I never did this before because I hated the movie, but the last time I watched Godzilla Final Wars, I found myself yelling, fuck yeah. And I was like, yeah! I was like, never mind, this is epic.
But I also have pros and cons about the movie. The pros I have about...
me too.
Yeah, the pros I have about the movie is that it's very, very epic, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
It's got awesome kaiju action, and I love the inclusion of Gigan in it for the first time since Zone Fighter.
I just love watching Akira Takarada saying, they used to call me Boza in my college days. And then he goes out fighting like a like a boss, and the same with him and Koei Mizuno, just fighting side by side, being all badass. And I'm like, this is awesome.
Right. And of course, Toho's infamous ultimate slam against Zilla 98 is the 13-second battle between Godzilla and Zilla.
Never mind, that always made me say fuck yeah.
Yeah. But one of the cons I have about the film, thinking back on this now, being much more older than I was before, for Godzilla's last film, I think it could have been appropriate to like do the symbol of nuclear devastation film, like basically another film like the original Godzilla, or Mothra vs. Godzilla, or GMK, another film like that. That would have been the ultimate farewell to Godzilla for 10 years. That's one of the cons I felt about the film, that's what the final Millennium film should have been to commemorate Godzilla's 50th anniversary. But then again, one of the pros is at least Godzilla went out with a bang. I can watch this film and be entertained nonstop with hardly a single minute boring me to death, like Godzilla Tokyo SOS or Megaguirus especially. I'm glad that Shogo Tomiyama, in a way, he approached Ryuhei Kitamura himself to deliver the ultimate badass, epic, over-the-top Godzilla film they could possibly make.
And, well, that's my complaint looking back at it now. There's definitely more complaints that I have about this movie than anything, but my complaint with it is this movie is only for Godzilla fans, and that's why it failed at the box office.
Well, up to that point, the numbers for the box office were already declining. Ever since with I believe it was Megaguirus. Toho had to resurface Godzilla 10 years too early. So basically, Japanese audiences, they were still too used to seeing Godzilla in theaters. As a matter of fact, they were too used to seeing kaiju films in theaters overall, because by the time that Gamera the Brave came out in 2006, it flopped. Yeah, it flopped. I
didn't know that. Okay.
It didn't make back the money. It didn't do decent enough. It flopped badly. And that's why they never made another Gamera film after that. And so it was proof that the kaiju genre at the time was dead in Japan. But of course, with the Pacific Rim and Godzilla coming out, it's going to be brought back to life. But regardless, this movie did what it was supposed to. It entertained, and I love watching it every time I put it on. And I have the Blu-ray, which I can't even watch on my PS3 for some reason, because the disc has so many layers. I have to wait until the PS4 to come out so I can watch it in Blu-ray.
Jesus.
So I'm stuck with the standard definition DVD from Sony. What's your number 11?
My number 11 is Gamera vs. Barugon. May I just say that this is my favorite non-Heisei related Gamera movie? Because not only is this film dark, but it has a really good plot. And I think that the monsters... I actually think the visual effects in this movie are great. It has great visual effects. The monster design for Barugon looks amazing. And unlike in the original Gamera film, Gamera in this movie looks really good too. He doesn't just look like a papier-mâché monster. And the soundtrack is really good. The guy who did the soundtrack, he also did the soundtrack for one of my favorite movies of all time, The Human Condition, and I can definitely tell that he did the soundtrack for this one. It has a really epic, booming soundtrack that actually sort of mirrors Akira Ifukube's. Not only is it a grand movie on the epic scale, but it's also very fun to watch. And it's really gruesome, too. That's another thing that I like about this film, is that the fights aren't just like monsters randomly throwing punches. And sure, this movie lacks Gamera quite a bit, and that's a bit of a downfall. But the story around Barugon, like when Barugon is destroying the city and the tanks are firing at him and everything, I like how it's not just like 3 tanks going up against him. It's like a whole Japanese fucking army going up against him. There's a lot of explosions, there's a lot of tracers going around all over the place, and it's fun. And this film is really made on an epic scale, and not only that, but it had one of the highest budgets for any movie made in Japan that year. Luckily, it made it back, because... Actually, no, probably not lucky it made it back, because then we got the shit after Gauss. It's the only movie in the Gamera Showa series that I really recommend. Because I think people who are not kaiju fans would actually like this movie. Because it has some actually interesting characters in it. And again, the plot is really good and very strong. And I think it's got some of the best visual effects I've ever seen in a kaiju film made in the 60s. It really rivals. In fact, I actually think the visual effects are better than some of the 60s Godzilla movies. Up until up until Destroy All Monsters. The visual effects in this movie they're really freaking good. And again, not much to say about this movie, but especially Barugon, his design is really cool. He's just a really badass looking and acting kaiju. And I also love his roar. His roar scares the living shit out of me. Granted, all the Gamera movies have great roars. Granted, all their monsters have these epic roars. Barugon's freaks me out a lot. That one and Jiger, for some reason. Jiger's freaks me out.
Yeah, me too.
Like, it still freaks me out. Like, I get shivers every time I listen to Jiger's roar. But, Barugon's is pretty close to that for me, too. Again, not much to say about this movie other than really give it a watch. It's a fun movie. It's a good movie. The best visual effects for a kaiju film out there.
I'm surprised that Toho didn't sue Daiei. I don't know if they did or not. Correct me if I'm wrong. For Barugon. Because basically, up to this point, we already know that they copyright all of their characters, and of course, they copyrighted Barugon. Barugon sounds so close to Baragon, and the first time I saw this film, I thought that Baragon was actually Baragon, the Toho monster, because they're very identical. It's different about
that's because of the English translation. The Japanese, if you say Baragon, and then if you say Barugon, they sound completely different.
It wasn't the translation that threw me off. It was actually somewhat the design of the monster, because
the design really didn't, for me, it didn't look like Baragon as much as it actually reminded me way more, to be honest. It reminded me a lot more of Anguirus. And that was because the second monster the first monster that Godzilla ever fought was Anguirus, which was also a four-legged monster with spikes on its back and a horn on its face. And then all of a sudden, the second monster that Gamera fought walked on four legs, had spikes on its back, and a horn on its face.
Well, to me, the reason why I thought that Barugon was the Toho Barugon is because of the horn.
I like Barugon better than Baragon.
Oh, you're breaking my heart. I love Baragon. Also, the fact that both monsters are brown.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That is very true.
The one thing that I found that Barugon probably may have been its own monster at the time was the lack of Baragon's ears. That's the one thing I remember from the Toho Baragon, is the ears.
Yeah, the ears stand out.
The Toho Baragon is fatter than Barugon. Barugon seems a bit slimmer than the Toho version. Even though it's not on my list, I love this film from the Showa Gamera films. The first three Gamera films I love absolutely. The rest are pretty okay.
This one I love. I love Gamera vs. Barugon because it has a lot of action in it, and the story centers around the goddamn monsters.
That's one of the reasons why I love this film too. But one of the other reasons why I love this film too is because it has intriguing human characters.
Right.
I remember watching this with my dad's friend, and he, after the film was over, he told me that he was surprised at how interesting and compelling the human characters were. You have the villain, who's called Horihata, something like that.
Something like that. I haven't seen it for a while.
But basically, he's the most despicable character in the film, but you can't help but be interested in him.
Right. And then you always feel bad for his partner that he just wants a backstabbing. That's all I have to say about it.
Our number 10, and my number 10 is Mothra vs. Godzilla. I guess it's no secret that this is one amongst the best Godzilla films in the franchise. It's just a kaiju classic. It's a true Godzilla classic because this is one of the few where Godzilla is represented as the villain. Later down the road, he becomes the superhero of Japan.
Actually, I love the explanation of why. And if you watch Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, it explains it perfectly.
Oh yeah. But we might get to that later. After King Kong vs. Godzilla which was a way too comedy-ish for my taste, but I still like it.
Oh yeah, me too.
They returned Godzilla back to this serious, dark film with Mothra vs. Godzilla. And Godzilla is doing some serious damage to Japan once again, up to the point where the human characters have to ask people from Infant Island for help. And I love how Ishiro Honda incorporated underlying themes of, help your fellow man, we're all humans of the same planet, and all this. And, of course, Godzilla still being the metaphor for nuclear devastation and destruction. And I love how the military keep throwing everything they have at him, and he's still coming. Although I've always been bugged that Godzilla lost to two little caterpillars for the longest time.
I actually like how he's beaten, though, and it's their trickery that beats him. Because Godzilla's like this giant tank, and then all of a sudden he's beaten by these two little guys, and I actually like it. Because they just trick him. And, like, he thinks he's found one, but then all of a sudden another one comes, and then all of a sudden that one gives the other one time to move around. And basically, because Godzilla's a giant lumbering beast, he's too slow to be able to get both of them. And they use that to their advantage. And I like it. I like that a lot, but I'll speak more to it later, because that's way further down on my list.
So it's also on your list?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I can wrap mine up, because I'd like to talk about it more later with you. Mothra vs. Godzilla, I love it because it's a true Godzilla film,
It truly is. It's a great Godzilla movie.
Many people in general, in general, but also Zilla enthusiasts, they kind of slam Godzilla because he acts silly in, like, films like Megalon, Invasion of Astro Monster, with that happy dance. But they really never look at a true Godzilla film like this and truly judge the character.
This is a true Godzilla film.
This is how Godzilla truly is. This is the Godzilla that we fans know and love. And, of course, we also love the superhero one, but this is the true Godzilla that, we fell in love with in the first place. The Godzilla that Ishiro Honda and Tomoyuki Tanaka envisioned for Gojira.
Right.
And I'm glad that they managed to create another timeless classic Godzilla film with Mothra vs. Godzilla by taking him back to his serious, dark, nuclear holocaustic roots with Mothra vs. Godzilla. Your number 10.
You're going to hate me. Again. My number 10 is Monster from a Prehistoric Planet. I love this movie.
I like it too.
Oh, I thought you hated it.
No. I don't know where you heard that, but I like it.
I thought you didn't like it.
No, I like it. There's two versions of this movie. Well, that's not true. I remember owning the DVD for this film under GAPPA.
There's one version of the movie, but there's two different titles.
Yeah.
There's GAPPA, the Triumphant Monster, and then there's Monster from a Prehistoric Planet. GAPPA was the one released in theaters, but when it was brought to television, it was called Monster from a Prehistoric Planet.
I remember owning the DVD for GAPPA. It was shorter than the AIP US version. There's the sequence where the two GAPPAs, they rise from the sea, they start attacking Tokyo. In Monster from a Prehistoric Planet, however, one of the GAPPAs, they fly over Tokyo, and then they start attacking. So basically, I see as Monster from a Prehistoric Planet as the uncut version to GAPPA.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. I've only seen Monster from a Prehistoric Planet. I've only seen that version.
That version, in my opinion, is probably like the superior version because it has more scenes.
The main reason why this is on my list is because I love the characters the kaijus have. They're not just giant monsters here to destroy Japan. They're looking for their baby. I think that adds so much character to it. I mean, sure, it's a remake of Gorgo, but I actually like this movie better than Gorgo, to be honest, but it's a load of fun. Like the scene where the baby is reunited with its parents. It's such a touching scene. It is. It's a really touching scene. It's got this really cute music playing. And then the baby Gappa flies for the first time, and then it's just the father looking at the mother and him flying around, and like he's so proud of his son. You could just tell he was really happy that he's finally got his son back. It's cute, and very rarely, other than Son of Godzilla, do we find kaiju cute, and in a good way. It's a touching kaiju movie, and above that, it has some pretty good action scenes in it too. Like with the Japanese military fighting him in Osaka. I don't think it was Tokyo. I think it was Osaka because it had that castle. And then like the jets. May I just say, the visual effects in this movie were done by Akira Watanabe, who worked close with Eiji Tsuburaya, and it definitely shows because I think the jets are really good in this movie. Like the missiles launch really well, and it looks really good. And the miniatures, I think, are really good in this film too. again, the main reason why it's on this list, though, is because of the characters of the kaiju themselves. Because let's face it, the characters themselves, for humans-wise, are rather boring and kind of really stereotypical. The monsters themselves are the characters, and it's not the normal sort of kaiju film where it's just a monster destroying Japan. They have a reason why they're in Japan. And the only reason why they're so angry is because somebody took their son away from them and they want to know where their son is. And then above that, I like how it distinguishes the mom and the dad. The mom has the one with a slightly rounded horn on her head. The father has a really sharp horn on his head and a really big one. I like that how they were able to not just make them look identical, they made them look different, like the difference between the sexes. I like that. Just adds that much more of a character to it. And I really like their roar. I like the Gappa roar. It's menacing, but yet not too menacing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really cool sounding. Again, the reason why it's on this list is because it's not a normal kaiju movie. It sort of branches off from the norm and creates something I actually think more interesting than some of the kaiju films.
I don't mean to get off topic, but one of the things I remember about this movie is that it had some of the blackest Japanese people I've ever seen.
Oh my god, that scene is so racist.
That little native kid. I remember watching this with my dad's friend, and he kept on questioning, "Is that kid black or Asian?"
He's Asian.
Oh, he's Blasian. That's what he is.
Blasian, oh my god.
But anyways, what I remember about this movie, and I haven't seen it for the longest time, but what I remember about this movie is the underlying themes that I caught from the film. And I thought that the true monsters are not really the monsters themselves, but rather humans. You have that gritty businessman who steals the baby Gappa just because he wants to make a profit out of his existence.
And again, I really like that about this movie too. Again, as I said, this isn't a typical kaiju film.
It really plays out those kind of themes that you would expect from one of the Ishiro Honda kaiju films. But
yeah. Again, it's a remake to Gorgo, but I think they added enough to this movie to separate it from Gorgo.
Right.
That I was like, this actually could work as its own original movie. Because I actually found out about Gorgo through this movie. Because it says it was a remake or a reimagining of the film Gorgo on the back of my DVD case. It's a fun movie. It really is. I actually think it's a good movie. I heavily enjoy this movie.
We're moving on to our number 9. My number 9 is King Kong Escapes, and I finished watching this movie today, in fact.
Oh, that movie's so enjoyably bad.
Yeah.
I love Doctor Who.
Speaking of that character, when I first bought this movie a long time ago, I thought Doctor Who was the Japanese version of Doctor Who. You know, one of the doctors from the BBC version. Because on my DVD, the back cover, it has the character listed as Doctor Who, spelled WHO. Then I recently bought the Japanese version. In the subtitles, they refer to him as Doctor Who, spelled with HU. Yeah, it's HU. So I've been confused about that for the longest time. Anyway.
I've only seen the American cut. What's the differences? Because I heard that there is quite a bit of a difference.
There is no difference, believe me.
Oh, okay.
Apparently there's like additional scenes, but I couldn't figure out what scenes were new and what scenes were not.
Was Gorosaurus' roar the same?
Yeah, it basically is more of the same. I think the only thing that's new about it is like the human interaction scenes. As far as the kaiju sequences, they're still the same.
Okay. I love the American cut because Paula Frees does the voice of Doctor Who, and Doctor Who is the most over-the-top villain in like any of those science fiction movies, and he's just so awesome. And I think that voice totally matches him, so I'm really scared to watch the Japanese cut. Because I know the actor who played Doctor Who, and his voice doesn't fit what I've always pictured that Doctor Who to be because of the dub.
The Japanese version, it kind of loses the charm of the U.S. version. I prefer the U.S. version over the original Japanese version because, for one reason, the character Carl Nelson, he's dubbed in Japanese, and of course that was a common practice with English actors back in the days. But yeah, it just doesn't have that same feeling as the U.S. version, which I was used to by that time. I prefer the U.S. version. That's the one I saw today. It's a really, really fun film from the Toho Kaiju era.
It was one of the last of its kind.
This film was made in 1967, a year before that. Toho produced Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, which was originally intended to be a King Kong film. But Universal or RKO, I don't know who had the rights to King Kong at the time.
I think it was Universal at that point.
Yeah, Universal. They didn't want them to use King Kong. However, a year later, Toho is using King Kong for this film, so I don't understand what the what changed.
I actually do. Rankin Bass didn't like the idea for what turned out to be Godzilla vs. Sea Monster. They thought it strained from their cartoon too much, and that's why when Ishiro Honda took on this version, Rankin Bass said yes.
This film sometimes makes me wish that Toho could have produced their own King Kong franchise because I don't think this movie is bad. I think it's very good. I don't love it because it's bad. I love it because, it's a very good, decent kaiju film.
I love it. I can tell you, my dad told me when I was a kid, he was like, Aaron, I remember watching this movie, and King Kong was in it, where Kong fights a mechanical version of himself. And he kept telling me about that. And he kept telling me about it, and telling me about it. And I was like, I really want to see this, because that sounds epic. Until finally, I found it on DVD, and I bought it. And it was fun. I can't deny that. I think this movie's a whole shit ton of fun. But I think it's really bad at the same time. King Kong looks horrible. Well, he looks better than the one in 62, in my opinion, but...
Yeah, well, actually, with this King Kong, you can actually see his eyes. The 62 version...
What I liked about this one is, I liked how he also somewhat looked like a gorilla. King Kong versus Godzilla, I was watching it, and I was like, that doesn't look like a gorilla at all. This one, I could kind of be like, okay, that's kind of a gorilla.
Haruo Nakajima playing King Kong, he actually added some gorilla traits, like walking on his hands, or, just basically the overall architecture of a gorilla. And that's what I loved about the performance of this King Kong. He seemed very, very human in a way. He acted like the King Kong from 33 in a way. Not saying that the 62 King Kong didn't act like Kong in a way, but there was like he acted more, how do we say, monstrous in a way, but more about monster who was out of touch with civilization, because once they placed him in society, he had no idea where he was.
Oh yeah, like there's that scene where he walks into a bunch of power lines, right, when the Japanese military are told to fall back because they don't want to piss him off. He walks into those and he jumps, and it's a little character thing like that makes it more real to me, and makes it interesting.
Of course, the main thing I love about this is Mechanicong, which I don't know.
Oh God, he's so awesome!
I love that incarnation of King Kong. It's so
badass.
Ridiculous, but it's a really good ridiculous idea, having a mechanical King Kong.
Yeah, it's what inspired Mechagodzilla. Without Mechanicong, we wouldn't have gotten Mechagodzilla.
Basically, I like this film because it's so fun. It's a very decent King Kong film, and it's faithful to the character in some ways. It doesn't fuck it up like what TriStar did with Godzilla. I'm never gonna let that go. But on top of that, he fights Gorosaurus, which is an homage to the T-Rex fight from the original
T-Rex
King Kong.
fight, and he even breaks his jaw.
Yeah. So there's a lot of homages to King Kong 33 in this film. Since, of course, Tanaka, Honda, and Tsuburaya love the original King Kong, they paid respect to it in many aspects. All right, your number 9.
My number 9 is a movie that I love so much. It is from Shoshiku, and it is called The X from Outer Space, released in 1967.
Aww.
It is so beautifully bad.
I don't want to call this like the room of kaijus, but it's basically like within that structure. It's that bad.
Yeah. And, it's good. It's goodly bad. It's good.
Right.
I really enjoy this movie. Like, I've seen the original Japanese version. It hasn't been on forever, but it was on TCM and I taped it.
Yeah, me
and
too.
I love that. I love the movie. I think it's got somewhat of a new premise. Hell, I think the design of the AAV Gamma is really good. The soundtrack is so fun. The opening title song is so bad. But so catchy that you'll have it stuck in your head. It's like a green slime. You'll have, once you listen to the X from Outer Space theme song, Chiku, no moshi, no moshi, Chiku, no moshi,
Wow, you actually memorized that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, I've also memorized Save the Earth, but, from Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, but this movie is so delightfully bad, you can't help but like it. And granted, I also think the design of Gilala, with the monster, is original as well. Again, not much to say about this movie other than the fact that the plot is absolutely absurd and the monster scenes are really enjoyable. I think this movie has some really good wire workings when it comes to jets. The jets on this movie are really good.
Oh.
I know that's really something really weird to pick out, but that's just something that I always remembered from this movie, is that the wire workings for the jets were really freaking good.
I remember that some of the battle sequences with the military were very, very well executed, even for a bad film like this. And no, that's the only positive thing I have to say about this film. Because okay, I don't hate this movie. I don't hate this movie
at all. It's
wonderful.
I love this movie so much.
This movie is nostalgic for me because the first time I saw it was on Showtime, which I was even surprised they showed kaiju movies on that channel. I like it because, like you, it's so bad, it's good.
You can't help but like it, right?
Right. They have an outlandish kaiju. It's basically an outer space reptilian chicken.
I know.
That spits out fireballs.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of like a prototype version of Gigan.
Without the buzzsaw or the claws.
Yeah, as I said, like a prototype version of Gigan.
One of the things I remember about this movie is that the roar, Gulala's roar.
Gulala's roar is cool.
It doesn't even sound like a roar. It sounds like somebody screaming goes like, ah, something like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like.
Cool. I think it's like. It's something really ridiculous.
And it's more like moaning. You hear some moanings going like.
Also, the ending scene where they actually kill Gilala, well, they don't kill him, but they turn him back into his original form. I actually kind of like that scene because Gilala starts falling apart, and I actually think the visual effects are actually pretty decent on that scene. Don't get me wrong, they're still bad, but they're actually they're decent on that film. And when suddenly they just walk up to him and he's turned back into like this little ball thing, it's kind of cool. And I distinctly remember this one scene where the first time you see Gilala, the first time he appears, a mountain collapses. And I distinctly remember hearing this crank sound when the frickin' thing fell. Like you heard a and it wasn't even it doesn't even fall like a mountain. All of a sudden you just see it like it just falls down and like nothing happens. And I'm like, what the hell was that? That's not how a mountain falls down. Fun movie. Really fun movie.
Everything about this movie is really, really bad. Gulala, he has a very...
Not to make a movie? Yeah, watch this and Plan 9.
Gulala, he has a very unique design, but it is constructed very, very poorly.
Oh, God, yes.
He looks like a bloated pigeon. A bloated reptilian pigeon. The music, especially, is so... Oh, my God. It's not worse than Young Gary, I'll admit it. It's actually quite catchy, but you have this happy music, and you have weird, super weird music playing during the destruction
it's like
sequences.
A super LSD trip.
Yeah, that's basically what this movie is. On top of that, you have a love triangle in the plot that doesn't even make sense.
Well, here's the thing. The first 2 acts of this movie take place in outer space, so it's like a space opera. And they randomly have like this grandma's flying pie version of a flying saucer there. And then all of a sudden, the last half of the movie, they decided to add like this giant monster to attack Japan. Oh my god, this movie's so delightfully bad. As Robert Osborne said, we decided to play this movie because it's so bizarre. Like, he started laughing while he was talking about it, and I was like, yeah, that describes the movie quite well.
Yeah, but, this falls on the line of one of the, if not the most bizarre kaiju film ever made.
Oh, Jesus. I will always love this film. I don't care what anyone says. I think it's so good. It's so bad, it's good.
Alright, so,
Number 8?
Number 8. My number 8 is, Gamera vs. Gyaos. I just love this movie for many reasons, but the main reason why I love this movie is for the character Gyaos. He is so badass.
Gyaos is badass.
Yeah, and, for the first time, I think in a few Gamera films, in a few kaiju films, no, you actually see the people fearing the monster so much that they wouldn't even go out of their homes. You have a menacing character that is so intriguing in a way, but he is very, very lovable, in my opinion. I love Gyaos because he is such a menacing kaiju.
His roar is amazing. Like, I actually like the roar better on the Showa series than I do in the Heisei.
His roar in the Heisei series, they're basically eagle roars.
They're basically that eagle roar, but I think it sounds a lot more menacing in the Showa.
Yeah. Another reason why I like this film is because of the practical effects, of course, the action sequences, and I don't know, it's just a feel-good kaiju movie to me. But of course, the main reason why I really love this movie is because of Gyaos, and he just delivered this film for me.
I just remember this one visual effects shot that left me going, what the fuck? Was when he splits the plane in two, or the helicopter, and it just slowly comes apart, and the people start falling out in between. Like, that is not how that works.
I thought you were going to talk about the where he splits that car in half, and for some reason it's still running.
That's just as weird.
Right.
But at least that, I was like, okay, well, I guess if Yongari could do it, I guess this movie could do it.
What I really love about the character Gyaos is his design. He has that
his design is really cool.
Very, very flat head design, and he's supposedly supposed to be a vampire bat. Although you don't get a hint of that, he just looks like a regular winged creature.
I can actually see why people think he'd be like a vampire bat. I can actually kind of see that.
No, Daiei confirmed that he is a bat, a vampire bat.
Yeah.
But yeah,
how the fuck do you explain Space Gyaos in the next movie?
Yeah. I didn't get that at first when I first saw this movie or Guardian of the Universe. It wasn't until later when I got on the internet when I discovered it. He's basically a giant vampire bat. Although
I get that for the Showa series, not in the Heisei.
Yeah, I love it because of Gyaos, and it's a very decent kaiju flick in general. It's a very, very memorable Gamera film. I consider it amongst one of the best, if not, you'll disagree with me on this, the best from the Showa series. Up there with Baragon.
A lot of my lists so far have been movies that have been so delightfully bad I couldn't help but put on there. This is when I start getting more serious about them. My number 8 is Mothra. This movie has got a really interesting thing to it. One of the things that I really like about the film is its message about religion. I actually really like that. How this movie comments on religion and that, like, no religion is really wrong, just if it makes you happy, go with it. I like that. I like that a lot. I also thought it was rather ballsy for having the two fairies in there in terms of visual effects-wise. I thought the idea of Mothra was really cool, and you know what? I think, believe it or not, it's actually a rather dark kaiju movie with a really good story. The music is kind of lackluster, but other than the Mothra song, some of the best visual effects Eiji Tsuburaya has ever produced, in my opinion, came from this movie. A really, really, really original concept. like, even Godzilla has some, like, backstory to it as to, like, what it got inspired by. Mothra, I don't really know what the hell inspired them to say, okay, 2 tiny fairies and a giant moth. Maybe they just all got high one day, but thank God that they did, because we got a really good movie out of it.
Yeah. Well, it seems more like a tale of mythology. Maybe they were inspired by some kind of mythology. Whether it would be
It very well could have been, and it was interesting that this movie, a lot of the kaiju films beforehand were just targeted towards men, and men were predominantly the audience. This is the first time where females actually really got invested into a kaiju movie. Because, let's face it, the main characters in this movie, those 2 fairies, they're female. Right. And that's really cool. It's really cool, and of course we got that great Mothra song that'll get stuck in your head no matter how many times you try to get it out of there.
No matter how many versions there are.
Yeah, no matter how many versions there are, they'll all get stuck in your head. I also like its message about big corporations and stuff like that. I also love the country Rolisica, and how it's supposed to be like a mixture between Russia and America. I like that a lot, and, just Mothra, there's this one shot in particular where Mothra he's flying over Rolisica, and these anti-aircraft guns are firing at him, and there's just tracers and explosions going all around Mothra, and she's just flying over the city. It's a really good wire shot, and really good visual effects, because there's tracers flying around everywhere, smoke's building up, and there's explosions going off. Again, this movie has some really great visual effects. Of course, they don't match up to Mothra vs. Godzilla in terms of the Mothra itself, but a lot of fun, like, especially when Mothra is moving into the city in her larvae form and the tanks are firing at her. Some really good visual effects, a lot of explosion and explosions. It's really entertaining to watch. Also, the island set is really well done. Considering the fact that most of it was actually just shot on the set and the rest was matte paintings, it actually looks like a jungle to me. Sure, the natives were a little bit over the top, but by a little, I mean a whole shit ton. It's a really fun movie. It's not only a fun movie, I think it's a good movie. It has some good morals in it. It has some great visual effects. It has a great story. The acting is very top-notch. Though the music isn't what it could have been, it's still really good.
I actually do like the music a little bit, especially the, I don't know if this is Mothra's Destruction theme, but it's the theme that plays frequently.
Mothra's Destruction theme is pretty good. I do like that.
I haven't seen Mothra in the longest time, but I remember it being a good movie. I loved it for being a good kaiju film. Although I never understood the themes or the underlying messages behind it because I was too young to see it, and I haven't seen it for a long time.
The Japanese cut's about 10 minutes longer, and it has a lot more on religion in the Japanese cut.
Oh, really? Wait, you mean the US version?
The US version cut out the religion stuff.
I only saw the US version. I mean, what was it?
Oh, you saw the Columbia cut.
Yeah, I saw the Columbia cut.
Yeah, that's the one that's 10 minutes shorter, and they cut out some of the religious stuff because they were too afraid that it would offend people. Yeah, if you watch the Japanese cut's a lot better.
Number 7. My number 7 is Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, the original.
It's fun to me.
oh my god, it is. This is Ryuhei Kitamura's favorite Godzilla film. And it's these Godzilla films like Mechagodzilla, Megalon, and Gigan, where he based Final Wars from. He said that Final Wars is an update on those type of films. And it shows because Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is insane in terms of special effects. Especially the final showdown between Mecha G, King Caesar, and Godzilla. You actually see for the first time Godzilla bleeding to death. There's bloodshed in this movie.
Everywhere. Oh my god. He is like a blood sprinkler.
Right. I know for a fact Eiji Tsuburaya would have disapproved of this because I heard before that he hated bloodshed and tried not to show that.
Yeah, he hated bloodshed.
Yeah, but Mechagodzilla is so insane. I mean, the idea of having a robot Godzilla is awesome on its own. And to have him going up against not only Godzilla, but a giant lion is so over the top. But
yeah, I just want to point out That line is supposed to protect Okinawa, but yet for some reason he slept through World War II.
Oh, you saw that meme too, didn't you?
I did. I laughed.
Yeah. But it's such an awesome, fun movie. It's so over the top. It's good.
It's so fun. And the soundtrack by Masaru Sato is my favorite soundtrack by him.
Masaru Sato is I wouldn't say he's a good composer, but he's had a share of weird soundtracks. Not weird soundtracks, but decent ones. The one that
Masaru Sato and Akira Ifukube are the two biggest composers in Japan.
Oh, really?
They were, because Masaru Sato was known for scoring several Akira Kurosawa films, like Yojimbo. And Masaru Sato, in History of Godzilla, his first movie he ever scored was Godzilla Raids Again. And so that's the only reason why he kept coming back, was because he felt like he owed his career to Godzilla.
Masaru Sato's soundtrack, his music for Mechagodzilla, is one of the most memorable things from this movie that I can think of.
It's fun, it's kick-ass, it's full of emotion, it's the definition of awesome. Like if you open up the Webster Dictionary, and next to the word awesome, there isn't a picture of the poster from Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, fucking write to Congress now. Write to them now. You need to have that poster next to the word awesome in the dictionary.
But what I was going to say is that the music, initially, I thought it was weird. So weird that it's catchy.
I never thought it was weird. I just thought it was epic. Like, I was whistling that. I was a freaking, 10-year-old kid mowing the lawn. Like, no, most people sing, hard rock songs. No, I'm doing Godzilla themes.
I was watching Mechagodzilla the other day, and my friends came in on the scene where the fake Godzilla reveals itself as Mechagodzilla. And all of a sudden, Mechagodzilla's introduction theme comes on, and they thought that it was some jungle booty gorilla music or something like that. And for the longest time, I had no definition of how to identify the music. I always used the word weird. But then finally, it sounds like jungle music in a way. It always seemed weird to me that Masaru Sato, when it came to Godzilla films, he always composed the music for Godzilla films where he is in the jungle. Like Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, Son of Godzilla. Those are the ones I can think of so far.
Yeah.
But yeah, he really has this percussion beat to nearly every of his Godzilla soundtracks, especially
that's one of his trademarks, is Masaru Sato is very heavy on percussion. Like, just listen to Yojimbo.
And King Caesar, I love this kaiju. He used to be my favorite kaiju. Now he's been replaced by either Gigan or King Ghidorah. I love the fact that they took a real ancient Japanese legend, the Shisa, and they turned it into a kaiju.
Yeah, that's badass. My number 7 is another Shiro Honda movie, and it's Varan the Unbelievable. The reason why it's on here is because just 2 reasons. 1, the visual effects are really effing good. Varan looks amazing, the sets look amazing, the explosions are great, the direction is great. And then the other one is Akira Ifukube's score is phenomenal.
I love the opening theme to Varan.
Yeah, it is. It's really good. I actually think the rest of the soundtrack is pretty effing good.
Right.
Varan's theme is awesome.
I actually put out an extended version of that theme recently.
Yeah, I saw that. But where this film falls flat, however, is the story. The story is so general. You don't like any of the characters. It's actually a rather boring story. But what does make it worth it is watching the visual effects and listening to Akira Ifukube's music.
Right.
That's the only reason why I like this movie so much, is because the visual effects are so goddamn good. The music I can listen to all day. Grant looks cool.
I still have no idea if he is either a giant mutated reptilian squirrel, flying squirrel, or if he's just a giant monitor lizard with wings.
I'd probably go with the giant monitor lizard, but I like the squirrel thing because that just sounds more epic.
Right.
Again, it's just a really cool design. Varan's roar is good. Varan's roar is really, really good. It was a cross between the Godzilla roar and they added in a couple other things.
the Varan roar and Godzilla's roar is the most used kaiju roars used for the Ultraman series in the originals.
Yeah. Well, also Varan's roar became Gorosaurus's roar. It became Baragon's roar.
It's a very popular roar.
It is. It's a very popular roar, and it's very recognizable too. I love Varan. I just absolutely love this movie. Again, the story is really weak, but the visual effects and the music is really good. It makes this movie really worth watching. And the reason why I put this on as number 7 is because if you want to watch a kaiju movie that has good visual effects, watch this movie. It has some really effing good visual effects. To the point where some of the scenes where like buildings are getting blown up or smashed, they actually look real. And I think a lot of that has to do with because the film's in black and white, which I actually know why. But yeah, it's a good movie. It's a good movie. Check it out.
I watched Varan very, very recently, and I remember liking it. The problem was this film lacked somewhat the enthusiasm that Godzilla did.
Well, this movie was supposed to be a TV movie, but at the last second they pulled the plug on that, and so they just made it a feature-length movie. Which explains why it's in black and white, and explains why several shots are really sort of flat.
Right. Because
they were shot in regular full-screen frame, like TV, and then they had to be converted to Toho scope.
But yeah, it didn't really seem like Ishiro Honda wasn't very too interested in this film.
It didn't sound like he was very enthusiastic about it. Right. And you kind of get that in the movie.
Because sometimes the film feels like it drags on too much, and it just falls into generic monster stereotypes like, oh, we need to destroy the monster, he's going here, let's set up bombs, bring in the military, and save the damsel in distress.
I mean, granted, those scenes are awesome, but it's just the story is so lacking. And considering that it was Ishiro Honda who was behind it, it makes you that much more disappointed. But, again, you really should watch this movie, again, for the music and for the visual effect.
I've never seen the U.S. version, which is...
I
never have.
You're lucky, my friend. You are so lucky.
Why? Is it that bad?
It's atrocious.
Explain.
90% of the story is different. The acting is terrible. You lose Akira Ifukume's music, and a lot of the visual effects scenes were taken out.
Yeah, I heard that the scenes with Varan flying are taken out.
Which that I could see why, but it doesn't. It suddenly just jumps to him in the ocean, and you're like, how the fuck did he get there? At least in the Japanese version, you understand, well, he flew there.
So moving on to number 6. My number 6 is Frankenstein Conquers the World.
I don't like this movie.
Oh, it's a classic!
Oh, I know it's a classic. I still don't like it. I just like the first 10 minutes of the movie.
I love this movie because it just seems like a very sincere film from Ishiro Honda. Because
okay, I do get that. I do get that. Don't think I don't. I just personally don't like the movie. Sorry.
As much as ridiculous as a giant Frankenstein kaiju sounds, they executed that idea perfectly with this film because they were able to tie the Frankenstein monster to an issue that is Japanese oriented, and that's of course the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I love how there's parallels to that and the radiation that mutated Frankenstein's heart and turned him into a giant kaiju. I love those underlying themes that Ishiro Honda added because of course we all know he's a World War II veteran and experienced the Hiroshima destruction firsthand. So I love how...
Which, again, I love the first 10 minutes of the movie. I like that idea. I just think the film after that is very good. Other than Nick Adams. I love Nick Adams.
I've seen both versions of this film, both the Japanese and U.S. version. There's not much of a difference.
Other than a giant octopus fight.
Yeah, other than the giant octopus randomly added at the end of the film, which was...
that was kind of fun.
That was Henry G. Saperstein's idea. That sequence is in the international version.
Right, which is my favorite cut.
Yeah, just because they have the octopus in it.
Yeah, I love the giant octopus. I was with Henry G. Saperstein when it came to that. I love the giant octopus. Because it looks good. I think the octopus looks really good.
Which I have no idea why Saperstein wanted to add the giant octopus. There was like no connection to the plot at all.
Because he loved the octopus fight in King Kong vs. Godzilla.
See what I love the soundtrack to this movie. It's so dark. It's so brooding.
Yeah, the soundtrack for this movie is really good. Yeah. I will give it that. It's some of Akira Ifukube's most unique scores.
It's definitely Ifukube's style of music. If you can put all of different kaiju soundtracks all together from either Gamera or Frankenstein or even Gappa, you can pinpoint which one is Ifukube's because it has his signature style. And, of course, he always delivers a brilliant piece of music with this film.
And I always thought that this sounded a bit prototypey compared to War of the Gargantuas, but I'll talk about that a little later.
Right.
But still a very good and interesting soundtrack. Like the main title, the title music, really ominous and really creepy, and really sets the mood. That's something that I really loved about the first 10 minutes. I love the first 10 minutes of the movie. It's just I felt like the rest of the movie felt lacking. Yeah, sorry.
I like the fact that they called the Frankenstein monster Frankenstein instead of the monster, because I always felt that and I said this before in our I think it was our reviews of the Universal Horror Monsters. Yeah. I always felt it was appropriate and suitable to call the monster Frankenstein because it is, of course, the creation of Dr. Frankenstein. And
right.
like a child who adopts his or her father's name, the Frankenstein monster, who is a child of Dr. Frankenstein, needs to adopt its father's name. I thought it was appropriate to always call the monster Frankenstein. And I never ever thought that it was inaccurate to call the creature by that, because by legal terms, in a way,
that is supposed to be his name.
Yeah, that's supposed to be his name. And I'm glad they call the creature Frankenstein in this film. Of course, it has one of my favorite kaijus in it, Baragon, in it. I kind of overanalyzed this before, and I kept on asking myself, why is Baragon in this? I watched this recently, and there is no explanation to why is he there, how did he get there, and what purpose does he serve to the plot?
That's one of my issues with the movie.
Yeah,
like, why the hell is he there?
I guess the conclusion that I came to was that he's just there for the sake of having a kaiju for Frankenstein to fight. By this point, all kaiju films had monster brawls, and I guess they needed something like that.
Well, you see, I'm all for a random monster when it comes to monster fighting, but when it came to a movie like this that had allegory in it, that was supposed to be dark, especially from Ishiro Honda, I expect there to be a reason why why Baragon's there. I expect there to be a reason why, and an interesting reason why, but there wasn't. And again, that's why I think this movie lacks.
I mean, it would have been very appropriate if they explained that the nuclear radiation or the fallout from Hiroshima or Nagasaki caused Baragon to get mutated. And
now that would make sense too, but it's not. And not that, I know I complained about Varan, that was the same thing, but again, I know I said I don't like this movie. I do. Don't think I don't. It's just not so memorable I would put it on my list.
Yeah, I love this movie so much. I love watching it every time. It's a very good movie, and it's not as cheesy or ridiculous as it sounds. It's very executed perfectly, and there's reason given as to why Frankenstein is a giant. And I love that, and yeah, it's just a very great film, a very good kaiju film, one of the true masterpieces from Ishiro Honda.
My number 6 is the original Mothra vs. Godzilla. Holy fucking shit. Not only does this movie have good visual effects, actually outstanding visual effects, but it has a really good story. It has really good and likable characters. Even the villains are actually enjoyable. And they're not over the top either. They're villains, but they're not too over the top. Again, the story is really unique. And I think this is one of those cases where everything added up to make a good monster movie. Added up not only to make a good monster movie, a good movie in general, and a good piece of cinema. And for God's sakes, that final fight between Mothra and Godzilla is amazing. The wire works are so good because you got Mothra's head bobbing around, you got her legs moving around, you got her flapping her wings, you got Godzilla's tail going around. Some pretty ballsy stuff for Eiji Tsuburaya. And I also want to take notice that the character of Mothra in this movie is really good. Because I love how she agrees to fight Godzilla even though she's dying because she has to protect her egg. She's willing to give up her life to save her children. You know, because in the original Mothra, she doesn't destroy Japan for the sake of destroying Japan. She's there to save what she loves, which is the two fairies. In this one, it's even more personal. Now the fairies aren't in danger, it's her children. It's basically her future. I think it's really admirable how brave Mothra is. And I know I said this in my video on Tropic Planet 5 called Mothra, where I talked for like an hour about my analyzing of Mothra's character. I never thought I'd do that, but I wound up doing it anyways. I think this movie really embodies the character of Mothra extremely well, and that is she's extremely brave. And she goes up against a monster where she knows she won't be able to win, but she fights him anyways. And that's a very Japanese thing. That is a very Japanese thing. Where even if they think they're going to lose, they'll still stand with their opinion. I always look back to World War II. They knew they were going to lose, but they were still willing to die for their country. As if Mothra is a very Japanese, her character is a very Japanese thing. And above that, I love how Godzilla is characterized in this movie as he's still evil. And I love how frightened everybody is of him. Like in King Kong vs. Godzilla, I got a sense that people were scared of him, but I got a sense for a different reason. I got a sense that in King Kong vs. Godzilla, they were scared of him because it's a giant monster. In this movie, I got a sense that, oh my god, it's Godzilla. We're fucked. And another thing that I really like about this, I love how the Japanese military actually give a fuck in this movie and fight with everything they've got. Now, you don't just have like a couple tanks firing at Godzilla, no. They have the entire Japanese army going up against that motherfucker.
Right.
And their plans are original, too. I like it how they have to do this. And they're not doing this just because, okay, well, we gotta have some action scenes. Ishiro Honda characterizes, especially that general, he characterizes that they're fighting for their home. They're fighting to save lives. And it's very pro-military in that sense. That even though they'll probably lose, they're still willing to lay their lives down and to fight Godzilla. Again, just an extremely good movie in general. It's not just a good kaiju film, though. Yes, it is a very good kaiju film. It's an extremely good movie. And an excellent piece of cinema that's extremely underrated, in my opinion. Akira Ifukube's score is so beautiful. Especially Godzilla's theme. This was the movie that really set Godzilla's theme.
Right.
I love it how you got the bum, 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 bum.
It actually
you
said...
have that. You have that there. And you're like, that's the moment where you're like, holy shit, here's Godzilla, he's coming. And then all of a sudden we have... bum, 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 bum. And it's just the violins playing. And that is the impending doom of him approaching you. And then all of a sudden we have the brass come into that. And he's here and he's going to blow shit up. I just love how the music that he has just slowly builds up and then comes to this huge epic moment and just brings to life this movie. That, like, if anybody else did the music for this film, it would not have worked. I think the music is really what 100% makes this movie fit together perfectly.
Number 5, but I can see that my number 5 is on your list somehow, which is War of the Gargantua. So I'm just going to skip ahead to my number 4. And...
Well, no, let me do my number 5.
Alright, fine, go ahead.
Hey, let me do my number 5. We're not running into this trap again.
Alright, fine.
My number 5 is Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. And the main reason why it's on here is because the characterization of Godzilla. And it's like normally when Godzilla fights a giant monster, he's there because he's normally either protecting something that he loves, or he's fighting it because that monster attacked first. This movie is something new. Destoroyah killed the only other living member of his species. The only other thing that he could somewhat communicate to, protect, and even feel loved. And Destoroyah killed it and took it away from him.
Right.
Godzilla is not fighting Destoroyah for the sake of fighting a monster. He is there because he's pissed off. Now, again, I have to say that this isn't just a good kaiju film. I think it's a good film in general, and an epic way to end a series. Not only does it, tie everything with Godzilla together in a nice, neat little bow, but it's also really dark. And then above that, this movie's really sad, and for more than just because Godzilla dies. The movie is also sad because it was the end to my all-time favorite composer, Akira Ifukube. This is his last film score he ever did. And how fitting is it that the last piece of music that he ever composed was Godzilla's death music?
I never put that together until now.
Like, he said that he begged to score this movie. I'm pretty sure they would have let him do it anyways. But he begged to score this movie. When he found out that this was going to be the last Godzilla movie, he was begging for them to let him do the music. Above that, the score is good. And the creation of Destroyer being tied to the Oxygen Destroyer, that's cool. The weapon that killed the original Godzilla, that's so cool how they were able to tie everything together in that last movie. Destroyer's design is so cool.
Right.
Oh my god.
He looks like the
that
devil.
Monster, yeah, and it's not exaggerating. He looks like the goddamn devil. He's scary. Destroyer is really scary. There's a lot of allegory in this movie, which I won't get into because, again, it will take me about 3 hours to explain. Again, it just adds... to me, it really brought back what Ishiro Honda wanted. A darker movie with a lot of emotion. Like, he always said that quote that monsters are always either born too big. Like, he has that quote. But I think this is really them embodying that in this finale. It's an absolutely wonderful finale. And of course, if you're a Godzilla fan and you haven't seen this movie, you're actually really not a Godzilla fan. But if you're just a fan of film in general, you might have a hard time with this movie, but you'd like it. Because by the end, you're really invested in not only the monsters, but the human characters themselves, witnessing what's going on in front of you. And then, of course, Godzilla's meltdown. I still cry to this day.
It is one of the saddest deaths ever filmed. And that's because
the only other death scene that makes me cry whenever I watch it is the death of Spock in Star Trek 2. And that's because I grew up with that. And I grew up with Godzilla. And, it's a very hard scene to watch because, it's the symbol of your childhood just literally melting away in front of you. It always brings a tear to my eye. No matter how many times I watch this movie, it always brings a tear to my eye, and it's so fitting that Akira Ifukube specifically scored Requiem last. That was the last thing he ever composed.
Right, and it's such a fitting track too, because it kind of seems to be not only emphasizing Godzilla's pain, but it's also commemorating a legacy that began in the 1950s. You really feel that sense of power, and all that power is somehow falling apart.
It's one of my all-time favorite movies. Godzilla vs. Destroyer is my second favorite Godzilla movie. It's really well done, and it's a really, really powerful film. A very powerful film.
One thing I want to add, bringing up Godzilla Final Wars, the reason why I said that it's probably it was right for them to take Godzilla in that direction to, go out with a bang, was because we already had Destroyer. This was like the ultimate Godzilla film to end Godzilla for good, if they wanted to.
I've always said Godzilla vs. Destroyer was a way better way to end a Godzilla franchise than Godzilla Final Wars. And I still stand on that.
Because I think it was at the time, people believed that this was truly the last Godzilla film to ever be made.
Yeah, I really thought that, or I had the feeling that when they were making this movie that not only was the film portraying that, but I think everybody behind the scenes, and including the actors, said this is going to be the last of something huge. This is going to be the last movie of a series that is much larger than any of them combined. And I really got that sense in this movie.
Yeah, because basically Toho was ending their Godzilla so they can pave the way for TriStar's Godzilla, which they strongly believe was going to carry on Godzilla's legacy. But of course, that didn't happen. Then they had to bring back Godzilla.
They had to, right?
They had to. This is one of the powerful, if not emotional, Godzilla films out there in the franchise, aside from the original Godzilla, of course. But it's appropriate to compare it to that film because this film is directly tied to that film, especially with Destroyer, who is basically a product of the Oxygen Destroyer.
Again, another reason why it's so fitting that this was the last movie. It tied everything together.
Right.
Like, perfectly.
Now we go on to our number 4. Alright, so my number 4 is Godzilla 84, the Japanese version. I remember watching the American version, Godzilla 1985, and I remember it being somewhat of a bad movie in a way because of the bad pacing, American actors. Then comes the Japanese version, which I bought from the internet, and it's such an opposite film from the US version. It's so much more powerful and much more convincing. It's such a brilliant film that's equally on par with the original Godzilla. And this is the second Godzilla film I consider to be somewhat gritty and realistic, because Godzilla's still tied to real life issues, and he's still that embodiment of a real life fear that's still carried on with 1984. It's just a superior film to that of the U.S. version. I just find it very, very entertaining, while at the same time very intriguing in terms of storytelling and film crafting. I don't know if you ever seen the Japanese version, but there's
duh. Unfortunately, though, I have yet to get it on DVD, though.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. It is a lot better. Actually, it's leaps and bounds better. But I still think the film was a little boring. Like, I never got invested into the characters like I did in the original. And I found this movie just to be a slight on the boring side. Slightly. Again, I really heavily enjoyed this movie. And it is a good Godzilla movie. In fact, I think it's actually a very good kaiju film in general. So, don't think I was trashing on the film at all.
No, I can understand where you're coming from, because for the first act, it mainly focuses on the human characters, and it builds up to Godzilla. And during the second act, it just drops in.
Well, here's the thing, like, you can have the characters, this is my complaint with it, was what you just said, like, you can have it focus on the characters, but you need to make the characters interesting. I wasn't interested in, like, any of these characters, other than the doctor. What was his name?
Dr. Hayashida.
Yes. He was the only character that I was like, yeah, well, he's actually kind of interesting.
He's a product of civilization. Men are the only real monsters.
The U.S. version doesn't emphasize this strongly. And yeah, I find Hayashida very interesting. Right. And he studies Godzilla because Godzilla killed his parents 35 years ago during the 1954 incident. But up to this point, he has forgiven the creature. And now, the fisherman, he holds a grudge for Godzilla, one that Hayashida can relate to. And I found that very interesting with the characters that was completely cut out from the U.S. version.
Yes.
What I love about this version is that it kind of like whatever negative criticism anyone would have against the U.S. version, all that negative criticism can be reversed because all of those things that were lacking in the U.S. version are restored here. The characters are far more compelling than they were in the U.S. version. In the U.S. version, they were reduced to just generic characters that needed to be there to fill in some plot lines. You know, you have the generic scientist, the generic damsel in distress, and the guy who gets the girl at the end. However, in the Japanese version, it's really not the case. Not that much anyway. They serve a purpose to the plot. They're not just there for the sake of being there.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. I still found myself a little bored with them, but it was still really fun.
Right.
You know, it's a good movie. It is a good movie. It was just slightly on the boring side.
What I don't understand about the U.S. version is the inclusion of Raymond Burr again. I mean,
well, I thought it tied well with Godzilla King of the Monsters, but it's too bad because Raymond Burr. Great. Say what you will about Godzilla King of the Monsters. I thought his performance was great.
Yeah, I agree too. I have no idea why some people don't like King of the Monsters. In this version, however, Steve Martin doesn't do anything that substantial like he did in King of the Monsters. In King of the Monsters,
right, yeah, and that's where the film is really lacking.
Technically, he's in the United States, watching Godzilla's destruction, not doing anything but giving people these advices that don't even help. I remember watching this film very recently, and there was this line he said to one of the military generals saying that he's looking for something, searching. If only we can figure out what it is. And Godzilla is just not looking for anything. He's just on Tokyo because he was disturbed. However, I do believe that the ending of 1985, in my opinion, is a bit more effective than the Japanese version, because in the Japanese version, the volcano is just erupting, and you have the sad music at the end. But then you have Raymond Burr's narration, which I found very fitting and very conclusive to this film. Much more effective, in my opinion. It kind of does speak of Godzilla as this force of nature, and that he's not at fault for what he does. He's no different from a tornado or a tidal wave, as Steve Martin says. Raymond Burr.
Like that, the speech that he gives at the ending of 85 is really good.
Yeah. It's one of the things I do love about the U.S. version. I mean, I don't hate the U.S. version at all. I like it. I just find the Japanese version superior.
Japanese version is way superior.
Yeah, and I refer that
version. And also,
version.
one of the things that I love in the Japanese version is the Russians trying to stop the nuclear missile from launching, but he doesn't make it in time. And in the American version, it looks like he's specifically trying to launch it.
Oh yeah, because during the mid '80s, there was still like tensions between
Cold War. A lot. Cold War. And what I liked about that was it was like the Cold War was bringing the world together. I mean, Godzilla was bringing the world together, which is something that I want to bring up in my Godzilla series, you know. And it was something that Shiro Honda would have been happy with as a message in it.
I do love this Godzilla suit. I love it very much.
I do.
It's so menacing.
Well, I like its face. At least the suit's face. Yeah. I love the face.
Well, I love everything about it. The face, especially, is the thing that I remember about it, because
I don't like its position on its spikes.
I don't find it any different from any of the other Godzilla suits. I find it regular, traditional, but it's the face that gets me. Godzilla's face.
The face, it's the face that what really makes this suit work for me, and very unique too. I actually think the face on this one actually has a lot of character to it.
This is probably correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first menacing looking Godzilla since Mothra vs. Godzilla.
Well, yeah.
Godzilla has been looking somewhat cute.
I thought that he looked menacing in Terror Mechagodzilla.
Yeah, but he still...
He looked like he meant business more than menacing, I guess.
Yeah, but he had that kind of bold, heroic look.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so never mind. Yeah, I'd go with that.
Yeah. But this is the first Godzilla since Mothra vs. Godzilla who's just absolutely mean-looking and menacing and overall threatening.
Totally.
This is a scary-looking Godzilla. And all of a sudden, they just amp it up with the Godzilla vs. Biollante, which is...
And I like the mechanical head that whenever it roars, it lifts its upper lip, and you see it, snarling. I like that. Yeah. I thought that was a really good touch.
I just wish that Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, I don't know if you've seen the review for this movie, but...
I wanted to shoot them.
They should have seen the Japanese version.
Yeah. Well, Roger Ebert still hates the Japanese version of the original one, so he would have hated this one too.
Which, up to this day, I still don't understand.
I still don't understand why, but yeah.
I think he didn't like it because it wasn't the Godzilla that he thought was in mind, the silly Godzilla with the silly monsters and all these cheesy stuff. You know what I'm talking about. The Godzilla that a majority of Western audiences think of, from Megalon.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just my theory.
My number 4 is Rodan from 1956. Again, the next movies you're going to realize that it has a lot to do with the character of the kaiju itself. Rodan's character, there's something new, especially in the Japanese version. I mean, there's still some nuclear allegory in the Japanese version, but the main allegory, or the main theme of the movie isn't, world peace. It isn't stop nuclear war. It's something new. It's love. And that's what I really like about Rodan, is it has one of the most unique messages in it, and it's not a bad message at all. It's a very good and actually a heartwarming message. And to prove it is when Rodan's mate is dying, is getting burnt alive in the fire, instead of the other one flying away, the other one goes back down to die with it. And it sort of parallels the relationship between Kinji Sahara's character and that girl. again, not only is this a good kaiju film with some great visual effects by Ichi Tsuburaya, but it also has a really good story to it, and it has a really, really good, menacing, dark, yet at the same time tragic and very, very sad score by Akira Ifukube. Not really. There's a lot I could say about this movie. It's just, why am I having a brain fart? Again, it's full of great characters. The monsters are full of character too, which is another thing that I really love about it. Some great visual effects, great story, especially the Meganura. I like how that looks. That actually looks like a worm.
Right.
That still freaks me out to this day, and especially like the sound effect that it makes.
Yeah.
The squeak. It's creepy. And this movie was really gory for the 50s. I give it that. The movie had a lot of gore in it.
Yeah, in a
Like
way.
with the people getting like almost torn in half. And you know, some of the visual effects are really good too. Is like when Rodan's flapping his wings, and there's this one shot where this guy. It's one of my favorite shots in any of the Shiro Honda kaiju films. Where the guy grabs onto a tree and then it's just too far, it's just too powerful, and to try to keep himself still, and then when he has to let go and he just gets blown away. It's shots like that that just really makes us feel like you're not just watching a visual effects movie, you're actually watching the destruction of the city. And then another one was when Rodan flies over the Jeep that's trying to warn people that Rodan's flying. When the Jeep smashes up against the cliff, you see a miniature person in there, so it just adds, again, another element of realism to it.
Yeah.
And this is a very excellent movie. And it's very unique. Very unique, because, again, it's not like, oh, well, I mean, it's there, but it's not like, oh, we need to stop nukes. Oh, we gotta have world peace. It's more about love who you love and enjoy them while you have them. The two Rodan monsters, or the two kaiju, they're really tragic characters. Like, they're not just giant monsters to destroy the city. Again, they actually have character to them. And I also want to say that Rodan's roar is amazing.
One of the things that I remember about this movie, watching it as a kid, was the destruction sequence at the end. And
Yeah.
it was so well done, so well executed. It was, I really felt the impact of the Rodan's destruction. Like, when there's a scene where Rodan brings down this building, and you hear people screaming, and you see the water tower falling. There's real effectiveness to these scenes.
One of the things that's interesting is during that fight scene, in the Japanese version, the other Rodan doesn't reveal itself until that fight scene, which I actually like better. Because, one, it's a bit more shocking to realize that there's two Rodans, but at the same time it adds a little bit more to their characters, because that means that Rodan could have kept itself a secret to save itself, but instead comes and tries to rescue its mate. Again, adding to that love theme. The designs of Rodans in this movie are really menacing, too.
Right.
But yeah, at the same time, they're not so menacing you can't relate to them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I always found them more like just animals.
Right. Really one of the more unique kaiju films out there. And not unique like the X from Outer Space. Unique as in really well done and really well executed.
And underrated.
Very underrated, yeah.
My number 3 is also your number 3, and that's the Heisei Gamera films.
Yeah.
Although my number 3 is Guardian of the Universe, but since yours is the entire trilogy, that one right now.
I mean, I'll explain why. And I do this with all the Lord of the Rings movies, too. It's like I always watch them as one movie. Like, I gotta watch all of them straight through.
Yeah,
I do this with those 3 movies, with the Gamera movies. That's why I always put them in. I always look at them like they're in the same movie.
Yeah,
I know that's crazy, but that's what I do. It's just something that I always have to do, is I have to watch them in order. Like, I can't just watch, like, 3 and then go to Godzilla Raids again and then go to 2. I can't do that. I have to watch them all in order.
Right. I kind of do the same thing with the Dark Knight trilogy.
Yeah, I do that with that as well.
Let's just simplify, starting with Guardian of the Universe. Guardian of the Universe was the first Gamera film I've ever seen.
Very nostalgic film for me as well.
It's unlike any kaiju film I've ever seen at the time. But at the time, I was very, very early into the kaiju genre. The kaiju that I was most used to seeing was Godzilla. Then you have another kaiju who is not Godzilla, and it's a giant turtle called Gamera. And I found Guardian of the Universe to be very entertaining. It was such a compelling and interesting and enjoyable kaiju film. And it's one that, in my opinion, is timeless. Because up till now, I feel like not only is it a brand new, revitalized Gamera, but it kind of pays homage not only to the Showa Gamera, but to the Showa kaiju films from the 60s and 70s. It kind of has that classic feel to it. Yeah, and on top of that, they brought back Gauss.
Gauss is amazing.
Yeah, Gauss. It's really amazing.
And, you know, I thought the suitmation was really good. Some of the best suitmation out there. Well, actually, all three movies have some of the best suitmation out there. You know, it's a really bold move for Gamera, and for the better. Basically, as we all said, Shizuke Kaneko is the Christopher Nolan of kaiju. Right. I still hold that up. Yeah. Describes it pretty well. I mean, it's a fun movie. It's got a really kick-ass soundtrack. And, you know, the story's interesting and compelling. I mean, some of the characters are a little boring, but nothing like in 2. But it's a fun movie. It's entertaining. It's a good movie. But 3, I don't only recommend for kaiju fans. I mean, 1, Gamera Guardian of the Universe is only a kaiju movie for kaiju fans.
Right.
Because I could see a lot of people having a really hard time jumping into this who aren't fans of kaiju.
Right.
2, on the other hand, is just really badass. Great visual effects, amazing explosions.
What I love about Gamera 2 is that how it goes from dark to darker, and when you come down to Gamera 3, it comes down to darkest.
Oh, jeez.
I love how the level of darkness is, like, played out with each film. Yeah, they execute that perfectly with each film. Like, the levels are just balanced out really well. It's actually...
Visual effects, Legion's design is really original. Like, yeah, I can't even really fucking describe it other than, like, a mechanical bird, hummingbird. Jesus, it looks really... hummingbird mosquito thing.
I still have the ADV DVD of Gamera 2, and
yeah.
With it comes this redneck dub version.
Oh, that's so funny.
And the redneck actress, yeah, they call it a skeeter. I don't know what that is. A skeeter.
It's a mosquito.
Oh.
It's slang for mosquito. We call them skeeters up here. It's so funny. I love that. Sir, permission to shit my pants. It's so funny.
When I first bought Gamera 2 and I popped it in, I accidentally put in the redneck dub without knowing that there are 2 different English dubs to that movie. And for the first 30 minutes, I'm like, what the fuck? Oh my god, they totally fucked this up. For some reason, I was switching from the Japanese to the English, and I found out that the English voices are now different from the redneck ones. And then I'm like, wait, what happened to the redneck voices? And then I found out that there's the secret redneck dub version to Gamera 2.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's hilarious.
Look here, sweetie, just let the menfolk do the computering. You need to just get on back to the laundry room where the Bible says you're supposed to be.
I'm a lover, not a fighter.
Pinche puta gringo.
I don't know what that means, but I didn't poot at nothing.
Cállate.
They got any cold bear in there?
What we were originally looking for down here was some possums or coons, something tasty.
Why in the hell they only kill half them sons of bitches? You know, down in Vider, we'd kill them all.
I'm telling you, I don't see anything, just dolphins. They're so pretty, actually. Can I stay? What's that rising up out of the ocean? Oh, my fantasies!
Okay, Mother Scratcher, shuck on this, Black Cat!
Daddy, I'll be okay, don't you worry your pretty little head. It's not like we're going to Hokkaido, you know.
You've got the mouse. I'll see you later.
Huh? But what about Marty Robbins?
All right, sit down and calm down there.
Well, Gamera 2, again, I think it's almost made like a documentary. And then there's Gamera 3, which is a holy shit fuckery of awesomeness.
I don't know if you noticed this, but every soundtrack from Koh Otani, they kind of reflect the tone of the film.
They do.
Yeah, they really strongly do.
Like, 3's was really dark.
Yeah.
3 has really good characters, especially the girl. Fuck, what's her name? Shit. The girl who has Iris. The tune is really dark. And above that, the plot's really good, and the visual effects are amazing. Freaking suits on that, you could not convince me that those are suits. They look so good. Best suit mission I have ever seen is in Gamera 3.
Yeah, very, very realistic, too.
And it's my favorite Gamera design, too. Because they made him look really menacing, and they made him look very sort of evil looking, but yet when it comes down to it, like when he saves Ayana, that's her name. When he saves Ayana, you can tell that he's still got good in him. And, you know, it's stuff like that, and again, it also just adds to it that it doesn't feel like we're watching a special effects movie. We're actually feeling like we're seeing this in front of the camera, where we're actually seeing these humans interacting with Gamera. And that's what's really good about it. And again, the monsters have really good characters in it, too. Like, Iris is a really good character.
I really love the design of Iris. It's just like the Legion. It's unlike any other kaiju design I've seen before. Usually
I've ever seen, right.
Yeah, usually you have generic kaiju designs, but with the Gamera films, they're doing something unique that the Godzilla films haven't touched on, and that's actually creating new kaijus, and not only original, but uniquely designed.
Yeah, I completely agree.
One of the... You're going to kill me for this, but one of the problems I have with Gamera 3, and I mentioned this in our review...
Oh, is it that they felt like they were being too careful with the suits?
Yeah. I don't see this as a complete flaw, but more like an issue. In the first Gamera film, you can tell a little bit that they were being careful with the suits a little, but they were still going a little bit fast-paced with the fight sequences. With Gamera 2, they were going way out there. They were fast. And they had trick photography to help them achieve that illusion. However, with Gamera 3, you have Gamera just bumping into Iris, and Iris somewhat gently pushing Gamera aside. But then you have it backed up with a very violent move, like Iris thrusting her claws through Gamera or crucifying him against the wall. But regardless...
yeah, I never had that issue with the movie.
I don't find it as a flaw. It's just a small minor issue, but regardless of being the fight being a little slow, I still found it brutal and appealing.
Well, yeah, especially when they go inside of that building.
Yeah, the dome.
Yeah, the dome. That's really intense. That's freaking intense. I don't care what anyone says. It's a very intense scene, and you're on the edge of your seat watching it.
The main character, Akane, I think. No, it's Ayana. It's Ayana.
It's Ayana, yeah.
Ayana. She's finally having her revenge against Gamera, and it's somewhat of this very emotional fight. And Gamera is trying hard not to not hurt her in a way.
There's a quote on the Blu-ray box that says the greatest movie since the original Godzilla. The greatest giant monster movie since the original Godzilla. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, me too. It's definitely...
This movie is beautiful.
It's brilliant in every category. I mean, there's even a small love element that's not strongly emphasized, but it's still there. You have mystery in it as well. You have those two shady characters who infiltrate the government. Yeah, I love this film. I love everything about it. It's basically...
It's everything that a kaiju fan wants in a movie.
Right.
It's everything that a regular movie fan wants in a movie.
It kind of makes me wish sometimes that this film could have been released in the United States back then.
Yeah, I really wish all three movies got released in the United States.
Yeah, all three games.
Because, you know, the first one would probably be laughed at. Second one would be like, oh, well, that's actually really good. And then this movie would come out and be like, oh, that's actually Oscar-worthy.
This isn't a problem, but more like another minor issue. I really wish they could have shown Gamera facing the whole army of Gausses at the end.
I love that question mark.
I know you do. I hate fuck you endings. I don't consider this a fuck you ending, but it's more like this is left to the imagination of the viewer.
Dave, yeah, we're talking Adam here.
I hate loose-ended endings like that.
Apparently in the fan film, Gamera does wind up dying.
But I still haven't seen that, and I still even question its existence.
No, it's still there, because Shizuke Kaneko promotes it like crazy.
Sure. Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Yep. I still haven't found a copy of it on the internet at all.
Oh yeah, I know. It's like Godzilla vs. the Wolfman. I want to see that really bad.
Right. We'll move into your number 2, which was my number 5, but I skipped it, and that's War of the Gargantuas.
This is my second favorite giant monster movie ever.
I know. I really love this film.
I do too. And you know why? Because I have never seen, besides some of the Godzilla movies, but I have never seen a movie so focused on the character not being the humans, but the giant monsters. The giant monsters have more character in them than any of the human characters do.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one of the things I covered in my review of this film. Unlike most kaiju films, this really focuses on the central characters, which are actually the monsters. And
right.
Usually with kaiju films, the stories are somewhat connected to the monsters, but it's mainly focused around the human characters. There's either a love element or some sort of a other aspect. But here, the whole focus is Gaira and Sonda, which I love.
You know, I just want to point out Sonda's theme, or the music by Akira Ifukube, really echoes their characters too. Like, without their music, like, that's one thing that I really don't like the American cut, is that some of their music is gone, and it takes out some of their character development. The first time you see Sonda, where he comes down to rescue Gaira, if you notice Sonda's theme, it's almost heroic. Like when he's walking back into the woods and then roars one last time before turning and then going back into the woods where they can't find him. Bum, 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 bum. That one, it's almost heroic when you're listening to that. And then all of a sudden, whenever you hear it from the rest of the film, especially when he realizes that Gaira's evil needs to be stopped, no longer does it sound heroic. It sounds extremely sad and tragic. I love that. It's little shit like that that just draws me into movies and makes me love them. And then Gaira's theme is very menacing right from the get-go. It's very menacing and almost unnerving to listen to. And it's like that throughout the entire movie. My favorite character in the movie is really Sonda.
No, mine's Gaira.
Explain why Gaira is your favorite.
Everybody loves a good villain. And I'm pretty sure everybody loved the Joker in The Dark Knight. Well, here with War of the Gargantuas, they have a very good antagonistic kaiju, and that's Gaira. Gaira is basically what you don't want in a giant monster if such a creature actually existed in real life. Unlike most kaijus, the Gargantuas are fast. And what's scary is a fast kaiju like Gaira, who can not only swim, but can run, grab, basically act like a human being, but on an animalistic level, on a savage level. He's just awesome. He's very chaotic driven, basically because of his animalistic needs. He's just an awesome villain, and that's why Gaira is my favorite Gargantua.
Now, Sonda's my favorite one because he becomes exactly what he doesn't want. You know, I know that this confuses the living shit out of you, but I really don't want to get in an argument about it. It really doesn't confuse me. But he is the Frankenstein from Frankenstein Conquers the World. And, you know, he was abused by humanity, but yet he's also seen the goodness in humanity. Choi Mizuno's character is what really keeps him in balance to not want to hate humans. That she is the one person that's like, you know, humanity does have a good side. Gaira doesn't see that. Again, with Sonda, it's very tragic because when he sees Gaira, he's like, oh my god, I gotta help him. He's getting murdered. And so he runs down and rescues his brother. And then all of a sudden, when he discovers just what Gaira is capable of doing and just how evil he is, he suddenly becomes everything he doesn't want. Sonda becomes the embodiment of what he hates. Sonda becomes something that wants to be a loving, caring creature to suddenly something that has no choice but to end this thing's life for the sake of humanity.
Right.
And what's interesting is that before the fight begins in Tokyo, one of the greatest fight scenes ever, before the fight begins, Sonda is begging Gaira not to do this, not to fight him, not to antagonize the people anymore. But Gaira doesn't listen to logic and just starts fighting. And then it gives Sonda again no choice but to kill his own creation, to kill Gaira, his own brother. even if it means he has to lay down his life in the process, which actually by the ending, when they go into the ocean, I think Sonda then realizes that he has no choice but to die with Gyra in order for everything to be okay. And that's why I like Sonda, is that he's got that huge, real... And you know what? I think it also helps that the actors portraying the Gargantuas, you can actually see their eyes. That's their actual eyes.
Right. Yeah, Haru Nakajima has said that Gyra was his favorite performance in his career.
And it really is one of his best, too. I actually think it's, besides the Godzilla and the original one, I think it's his best. In terms of, like, character development-wise.
Right.
Because not only were these actors able to interact with each other, they were able to convey emotions in their eyes. Like that scene where Sonda finally realizes that he has to kill Gyra, it's perfect. It's just the look he has, and it's all conveyed through the eyes. And some people say suit actors can't act. Bullshit! Eyes are always the gateway to the soul. And this is a great way to prove that. All the emotions that the two Gargantuas portray or convey are portrayed in that scene. There's no dialogue. That's what's beautiful about it. And then, of course, it doesn't hurt that there are some really kick-ass action scenes with the military and, of course, a really kick-ass end fight scene in Tokyo. That scene is fucking amazing. Probably Ichi Tsurai's best work.
I love the fact how the suits have been tailor-made to be flexible for the actors. Now they have more freedom than they do with either Godzilla or Ghidorah. And there are no limitations, and they're able to perform wrestling moves on each other.
Yeah, and that was the thing, too, that I noticed. This fight seemed like it was genuine. The fight seemed like it was sort of sporadic. That's because it actually kind of was. The actors were playing off of each other. And that was what made that fight scene really unique compared to other giant monster fight scenes. And it's really funny because Haru Nakajima and the guy who played Sonda, I forgot his name, something Sakita, they were really good friends.
Yeah, it was Yu Sakita, so you were close.
Yu Sakita, yeah. It was a really good movie.
Yeah.
A really good movie, some great characters in it, or at least that's the thing. The movie focuses on the monsters, and you get characters out of the monsters, so it's really good, and it's one of Ishiro Honda's greatest.
Yeah. It's a masterpiece from Honda.
It is. It's one of his masterpieces. Most of what he does is actually really good, but it's got some really good themes about humanity in it, and again, just like most of what Ishiro Honda wanted to do, is this movie felt like he put a lot of his heart into it.
My number 2 is GMK, Giant Monsters All Out Attack.
How did I guess?
You should have known by now. Yeah, it's what I like to call a true Godzilla movie amongst many others. It takes Godzilla back to the dark roots of the original. And I'm pretty sure if Tomoyuki and Ishiro Honda were alive and if they've seen this movie, they would have been extremely proud of Shosu Kaneko. Godzilla is portrayed like a true force of nature. And this is like somewhat of the first time we've seen him like this in a while. For the longest time, we've seen him fighting giant monsters and just being a symbol of strength. With GMK, he's brought back to a symbol of nuclear devastation. Even though the radiation aspect is not in this, more like the spirits of World War II and all that, and all of their hate against the new generation of Japan. But regardless, it still takes Godzilla back to that element which made him a very intriguing, popular, and scary character to begin with. And with this film, you actually see him killing people, which in this film I really didn't have a problem with.
Well, they do it in a good way.
Yeah, they do it in a good way. Yeah, they didn't do it for the sake of the monster has to kill people and all that. But Godzilla does it
because because that's what Godzilla does.
Right.
And that's what this Godzilla is supposed to do.
This film also showcases my favorite Godzilla suit ever.
I love that suit.
Yeah. Godzilla looks so evil and badass. It just overshadows all other suits, in my opinion. But that opinion may be invalid when the new Godzilla comes out. It's such a great film. This film is so focused on Godzilla being the villain that they went up to the point where Ghidorah has to be a protagonist.
Now that was interesting.
Yeah. Although I do like that Mothra and Ghidorah were included, I do wish that they would have kept Varan and Anguirus.
That would have been even more interesting.
Yeah, because we haven't seen those characters in the longest time. And Ghidorah and Mothra, you know, they've already been remade with the Heisei films. We haven't seen Varan or Anguirus before. Not since Destroy All Monsters and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Also, the score is very good. Ko Otani also delivers another haunting, brooding score, just like the one that he delivered for the Heisei Gamera films. And it also reflects Godzilla's power and rage towards humanity, if not the people of World War II he's possessed by. And plus, the action sequences are brutal, so brutal.
Lots of explosions for you, Michael Bay fans.
It's got some of the well-developed action sequences I've seen in the longest time in a kaiju. Finally, our number one, and our number ones are the same.
What a surprise! Godzilla's Revenge.
No!
Uh-oh.
The original Godzilla.
Oh, yeah, that too. What else could you really put for the number one? I mean, not only does this movie have revolutionary visual effects, but it's got one of the best goddamn stories I've ever seen in it. It's also got some of the best and most three-dimensional characters in it, such as Dr. Yamane and Dr. Serizawa, especially Dr. Serizawa. It's also got my all-time favorite Akira Ifukube score in it. Right. It's haunting, it's menacing, it conveys every emotion that you could possibly imagine in a film like this.
Right.
Godzilla's roar is completely menacing. It is the movie that inspired every single kaiju film and which we have mentioned on this list, including Reptilicus.
Right.
It is the reason why a lot of us are here. It's the reason why a lot of us are if you're still listening to this, you're clearly a fan. But it's the reason why, you know, many of us do what we do. You know, this movie is the embodiment of why we love this genre so much. This movie is the definition of cinema at its best. It's, again, like King Kong, it's people doing what people thought were impossible, but still striving to do it, and they succeeded. It proves that no matter what you do, if you have your mind set to it, if you have your heart set at it, and if you're passionate at it, you can do whatever you want, and this movie is the embodiment of that. God damn, this movie is perfect. It is like the definition of the word perfect.
It revolutionized the kaiju genre. It started it.
Yeah, it did. It started it. There's no debating it. It started it.
And it's also the giant monster film that actually inspired more giant monsters than possibly King Kong. It inspired countless of rip-offs, imitations, parodies, you name it. Cloverfield was inspired by Godzilla.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. It is one of the greatest pieces of cinema ever.
It has so many admirers, you know, just Steven Spielberg, Tim Burton, you know, just to name a few.
God damn, this movie is beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. And when you watch this movie, you can tell everybody gave it their all. Everyone knew that they were taking a huge risk with this movie, but they didn't care.
Right.
They wanted to make this movie. And we had it full of allegory, full of emotion, full of action, full of adventure, full of good characters, full of everything, and just everything together in this film works, and it creates what we all love. It created everything. Like, a lot of us actually owe probably most of our creative lives to this movie, and I am on that list.
I owe 50% of my future career to this movie.
Yeah. Like, I owe like 75% of it to this movie. People wonder why I go fanboy over Godzilla. Like, I put a warning on my Facebook saying, if you bring Godzilla up to me, you'll probably get a 3-hour rant about why I love him.
One of the great things about this film is that it was made by rookie filmmakers.
And yeah.
They delivered a masterpiece regardless. And these are filmmakers, you know, who, not to say didn't have film experience, but they had no experience in the science fiction genre. Even though there's nothing science fiction about this film, it's completely serious and tackles on real world issues.
And that's one of the reasons why, again, it's my favorite kaiju film is because it's not treated like a kaiju movie at all. It's treated like a dead serious, almost war movie. And especially that final Godzilla attack scene where he destroys Tokyo. There's always that one scene, just to show how serious it is, where the mother's holding her children saying, soon we'll be with daddy in heaven. That is not meant for kids. That is very dark, very sad. I'm very happy that this movie has finally received the audience it deserves in America.
Right. And it's been critically acclaimed as the greatest giant monster film ever made by critics.
Ever made. Yeah. And again, like, even people who aren't fans of Godzilla like that movie and call it a good movie. Like, this movie, it's the same with Camera 3, but even more so with this one. If you're a fan of cinema in general, you will like this movie. If you want a good story, watch this movie. If you want to watch a movie for good visual effects, watch this movie. If you want to watch the story for some character studying, if you want to study a character, or if you want to learn how to study a character, watch this movie. If you want to watch it to learn how music can really impact a movie, watch this movie. Godzilla has everything. Godzilla is, in my book anyways, the definition of a perfect film.
Completely flawless film.
Literally, flawless film.
Without this film, the original Godzilla film, none of us would be here today. Me and you wouldn't be here talking about this film.
Without... Oh no, Godzilla's how we wound up meeting each other.
Yeah.
You know, Godzilla's how I found Bill. Godzilla's how I found Gorizard.
Yeah, Godzilla's why I have multiple accounts on YouTube, many of which have been terminated by YouTube and Toho themselves, and the reason why I want to go into filmmaking, because of this film. I seen King of the Monsters when I was in 5th grade, and that movie blew me away and got me interested in wanting to pursue a career in filmmaking in the future. Then, a couple years later, I saw the original Japanese version, and it just blew my socks off way more than King of the Monsters did. And then I was certain that I truly wanted to make movies in the future. If it wasn't for this film, I probably would ended up being a comic book writer, illustrator, or a priest. Don't ask. If it wasn't for this film, the genre itself, the kaiju genre, would be non-existent. And the giant monster genre in general wouldn't be as compelling, intriguing, and unique as it is today. And without Godzilla, we wouldn't have the upcoming American film from Legendary Pictures or Pacific Rim. We all owe a lot to this film, and we owe a lot to the Godzilla character for changing our lives in whatever way possible. Because of this film, we are who we are. Thanks, Adam, for joining me. Yeah, and thank you all
Please
for...
keep checking out Compound of Chaos.
Oh yeah, and Compound of Chaos. Link for the trailers in the description. Watch it. It's very well edited, and I'm actually very excited for this film, believe it or not. Thank you for sticking around for 3 hours.
Sayonara, guys.
Yeah, sayonara.